just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day and being on the podcast.
I appreciate the invite. Anytime I can talk about wrestling, that's a good day.
Yeah. For full disclosure, I would have invited you even if you weren't the Misha Official of the Year.
Okay.
So that's just the cherry on top.
Yeah, that was a definite cherry on top.
How does that work, these awards? Is it like a vote of your peers? Like, how does that, the Misha, Official of the Year happen? Is it your peers voting for you? Is it the coaches? Is it a symbiotic?
I don't know.
You have no idea?
I have no idea.
It's just bestowed upon you?
I don't ask questions. I really don't. Yes, it's just bestowed. Even though it's the actual plaque says NFHS, it's MESHA. And I don't know. I can tell you how, like, the national awards, like the Missouri chapter of the National Wrestling Association, I was inducted in 2018. And I know that is someone nominates you and there's all these letters of recommendation. I still don't know who nominated me to this day. I've never asked. So no, I don't know how they come about.
How was it that you were informed that you were going to win this? And then how long ago was it? Like a month, a year?
No, probably 2 months ago.
Okay.
I got an email from MESHA, from one of the people that works at MESHA, and said that I've been nominated or I've won this. And they asked that I fill out this, like a paragraph that would be said about you when you were standing out there. Wanted to make sure that my family was invited to join. That really was the best thing, to have my grown kids who are in their mid to late 40s there alongside me. I didn't start refereeing until my son was a senior in high school. So it's not like my kids were home ever while I was officiating. They were already gone. Yeah.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking, or what year was it when your son was a senior?
My son graduated in 98, so 97, 98 was his senior year.
And that was your first year officiating?
It was, and it was a very abbreviated year because I didn't want to miss any of his things. I just, there had been a local group that had approached me about officiating now that my son was going to almost be done with high school. And they had seen me. I coached a kids club for 5 years. And I'd always been in the sport in some manner. Cheerleading back in high school was the only way you could get close to a wrestling mat at that point. And then I had this kids club, and then a local group of officials, very well-known officials, said, we'll mentor you, we'll bring you along.
God bless.
And so I had, yeah. And they were a bunch of officials that people really kind of love to hate. They were a very controversial group of people.
Shocker.
I know. But I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be where I am were it not for their conversations, phone calls at 10 o'clock at night when you're coming home from a duel, and you have the ability to talk to someone about what you just had and share that information.
Can I take a step back before we actually get into the officiating role? I want to know how you even got inundated or where this passion for the sport of wrestling came. Because to my knowledge, I don't think you're officiating other sports, are you?
No, there is no
so
other
it's
sport. There isn't. There isn't.
So you only do wrestling, but
Yes.
you never wrestled.
No.
So when was was it you were cheerleading in high school and you're like, yo, what is this sport?
Cheerleading in high school, you know how they practice in the hallway, right? At the end of the school day, they're doing their pyramids and doing everything. And so we were out in the hallway of a very large high school. I went to Hazelwood.
Okay.
So it was very large, 20 cheerleaders. And I see this person come out of what I now know is a hot box. Mats over the radiator. And he's got plastics on, which were legal at that time.
Legal, not illegal.
They were
legal. Okay.
very legal at that time. And he comes out and he's
miserable.
Oh my God. And he's sweating and he's pissed. And I was like, holy crap. I think I can love this. I really wanted to know what makes a 16, 17-year-old human want to do this for this sport that all the girls thought was gross. Oh my, they're touching each other. Look what they're wearing. It was the total opposite for me. The fact that you did that to compete one-on-one. I've always loved boxing. Mm-hmm. So I like that one-on-one. thing, but then you have this incredible team concept that goes along with it. You're out there by yourself, but sometimes your job, even though you may not like to admit it, maybe your job's not to get pinned, right? And you can still contribute in your way. Not everyone's going to be a stud, but you can contribute to your team's success. And so from that point on, I loved it. And we would have 10 cheerleaders go to basketball and 10 would go to wrestling, and then you'd swap, during the week. And I could always trade and give somebody my wrestling so that my basketball so I could go watch wrestling.
Just wanted to take a second to pause the action and just tell you guys, thank you so much for consuming our content. Easy Talk is a passion project. This podcast is just a bunch of like-minded people coming together to produce some cool stuff and talk to some cool people. One of the things I would very much appreciate is if you could possibly like the video or subscribe to the channel, just because it helps us in the algorithm and ultimately to grow, to get more exposure to everybody, including ourselves, and ultimately just make a better product. Take a second. I'd greatly appreciate it. And on with the show. Did you ever conversate with the wrestlers? Did you ever start asking questions or anything?
No.
Or was it always like kind of an appreciation from afar?
Just in awe of what they could do. Backstory, that wrestler, Harold Ritchie. Harold was the head coach at Hell North for many, many years. Rittner, prior to that, Hell North, he was the wrestler. He was a year behind me. And we fast forward all those years later, and he's coaching in the corner, and I'm on the mat. It's pretty great.
When you first had your son, I guess like he's born,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is kind of like a question, parental more than anything. Did you always want him to wrestle, or was it something like if he chooses the sport, awesome, if he doesn't, whatever? I guess what I'm trying to say is there's this affinity you have towards the sport. Did it ever turn into a pressure you put on your son?
No. And the reason is I didn't know kids club existed. I didn't know there was youth wrestling. I had only seen high school and college wrestling after that. So here I am driving a school bus one afternoon, drop off some kids at a local school, sitting there up in the bleachers watching a basketball game of all things. And the administrator on duty just struck up a conversation, and we started talking about my kids and sports. And he said, there's youth wrestling. You should think about that for your son. I had no idea.
How old was your son at the time?
8.
Oh, so still very little.
Very little. And a good athlete, loved to play soccer. But I don't care how good you are with a soccer ball. If your little legs can't get you there, right, that doesn't matter. So at 8, I put him in a youth group, kids wrestling, and he wrestled until he graduated high school.
I think one of the greatest inventions in the sport of wrestling was weight classes, because it always keeps it competitive.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't understand that they think everybody's got to drop 20 pounds in order to wrestle. And you don't. It's as close to pound, right, as any sport could be.
I will say that if there was, because sometimes when I look at my own high school career, I look back with like, oh, some people say if I knew then what I knew now, I'd be a 4-time state champion or whatever. If there was only one piece of advice that I could have given a younger version of myself, it would have been focus on wrestling, stop focusing on the weight cut.
Exactly.
I did too much. I was owned by the scale.
Yeah.
And that was the one
And you're not alone. You're not alone.
I know.
It's everywhere. I was fortunate enough that my son was really good. And there were 4 kids that were all around the same weight at his high school, and he never got beat in a challenge match. So he could name his weight class.
Oh, God bless.
He wrestled 3, 12, 12, and 19.
Oh, okay, so 103, 112, 112, 119, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
Exactly. And
He was a small kid then. He was like my size. I was like 112, 119, 125,
he's still
130.
only about 140.
Really? Okay,
Yeah,
so still lean guy.
He's a little bitty dude, yeah. But he was just good. And maybe my perspective is jaded, but I do think more times than not, if you just, I don't mean to presume, but I think if you just work harder at your skill, then you don't have to drop 2 weight classes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now that I'm a coach, it's funny because there were a lot of things I always tell them two things. Number one, I will never tell you to do something I didn't do myself. And number two, I would never tell you to do something I wouldn't do myself. So just because I did something doesn't mean I'm going to tell you to do
Right.
it. And I would only tell you to do something that I did that I would still do today. So I tell the kids, like, because, you know, they'll have the questions and all this. One of the things that makes it easier is that hydration test, the BMI index.
Oh yeah, it's a positive.
Yes.
It's a great thing for
Because
the sport.
if you leave, listen, if you, we
and
did
there's
hydration.
still ways around it. Trust me.
I'm about to,
Those coaches are all out there. I know.
not, Devon Ford, I am so sorry. I'll tell you this right now. I cheated on that hydration test every year. Every year, because I was super competitive. And I always thought to myself, I don't want, if the end of the year comes, you know, I want to be able to choose the best weight class that was the most likely cause for success. However, I realized the error of that. Because I did that, because I could cut a little bit more pounds, I was then, like I said, so hyper-focused on the weight class and who's doing this and who's doing that. If I were to have gone back, I would just tell myself, dude, focus on your single leg and your double leg.
Work harder.
Stop focusing on the scale.
Ask
I wish.
questions, drill. And I think there's a plus to cutting a few pounds. You need to be pissed.
It'll naturally happen if you are working hard. You'll shed some weight. The difference is, when does that, and this is for everybody to answer and ask at their own time, when do you start getting into the detrimental effects of this?
Yeah.
When are you now running it in the red? When are you now hurting your body? When
you can't complete a first period
or you can't recover
because
properly?
you just cut
gassed.
6 pounds.
Do you see that even today? You get to watch more matches, and over the course of time,
It's far better today.
yeah, has the invention of like the hydration test, the body
Yes.
fat index, has it created for more healthy wrestlers?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a plus and a negative to year-round wrestling, right? I mean, I think it's a grueling sport. And the one thing that David said on the podcast that I thought was very valuable, it's just different. You can take any other athlete in any other sport and put them in a wrestling room, and they cannot finish a practice. It's hard. It's grueling. It ought to be. I think there's something that comes from working really, really hard. And my son used to know by how much sweat was on his sweatshirt, how much he had to float that night.
Oh my
Because
God.
he could tell. And it was only a few pounds, but that's how well you know your body, right? You understand those things. So I think it's far better now. Wrestlers are safer. The technique is insane. The stuff that they need to know in order to excel is crazy.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
When I go to state now compared to when I was in high school, we always had the beasts back then too they could definitely hang. But man, I saw some scrambles
It's
from
nuts.
high schoolers where I was like, these guys are ready for college, and they're sophomores, juniors.
And they're hanging on to a toe, and they're hanging on in these. And as an official, I thrive on that stuff.
It's got to be exciting for you too.
Oh, I've got the best seat in the house, number one. But I love the new boundaries. I love the scrambles. That's where I think you earn. I think that's where you earn your $1.98 as an official, is being able to, when do I stop that? When is that scramble to? When is it potentially dangerous? You've got to, and it's not an easy thing.
No.
I don't like my wrestlers to get hurt, but it's a tough sport.
How do you balance wanting to protect the athletes, but then also getting out of the way of them and letting them wrestle?
I think it comes with time. I think I tend to be a bit of I'm hard-nosed. I will let a little bit go further than a lot of officials, but I called college for several years, and so you learn when you watch a college match. Many times they put themselves in those positions because they know when the OU head coach Spates, when Spates first came to Missouri, and he was a really funky wrestler. It's when everybody, Askren then kind of picked up the whole funk thing, and And so, yeah, I just, it's just over time. I don't know
What
how
you
to
mean
explain
by
it.
funk, for someone that's watching that might not
Yeah.
understand wrestling, it was just a very weird. So scrambling is when two wrestlers are in a kind of conflict, a physical conflict,
Yes.
where there's no definitive winner and loser or dominant or recessive
Correct.
wrestler. They're in this position
It's
where
defense and defense and defense.
I would say it's both defense and offense, a scramble, right?
It's
Because they're
offense
both
when you
trying to
finish.
Yes,
Yes.
very fair. Scrambling is, in my opinion, the way I fell in love with wrestling, because I saw, a 30, 45 second scramble where someone's going for an ankle pick, reversal into maybe like he's driving his leg in so that he can get the high crotch, so that he can get the wizard in. I'm doing a lot of inside baseball here.
Yeah, but
the scrambles are where I was like, holy shit. Like, this sport is insane. That never, like, oh, you think you got this takedown. No, you're going to have to earn this. That's what made me fall in love with wrestling more than anything.
I'm so taken by, I mean, I love physicalness, I love quickness, and there's so many different aspects to wrestling. But as an official, and I think maybe as a fan, you want to see the scramble. You want to see all of this. And the good official is the one that can hold the call and hold the call. And then when it's finally three,
Now, yeah.
three, and you throw that up, you look like a rock star. And it's really nothing more than I'm telling a story. I'm just watching it unfold, and you let it burn, and then the takedown calls itself, essentially.
Yeah.
But I love it. I love the boundaries. I love being able to call that fall and hold the near fall and watch the toe. I just love it. I do.
God bless.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, and we're kind of going around the place, but we have time. This was the year where they changed some of the rules specifically for the scoring criteria, and I'm curious to hear your intake, and I'm going to give mine too. What do you think about changing the point system? So the takedown used to be worth 2, and the near fall used to be capped at 3 points. I think there was like a strange circumstance where you could have given him 4 count before. Maybe if it was like
you can add a point for stoppage if there's
if
blood,
like hurt or something. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so
but you can only earn the three near fall, and then there's a stoppage point.
so it used to be the vast minority of the cases could ever be a 4 point. Now, I mean, I saw so many tech falls at state and stuff. So the near fall can now go up to 4 points. The takedown is now worth 3 points. For those of you that might not understand wrestling, let me just kind of go over the point system briefly. Forgive me.
Yeah.
If you are taken down, that is 3 points now for your opponent. If you get up back to a neutral position, an escape is worth 1 point. If you're on the mats and you reverse the position where you were the recessive wrestler, now you're in a dominant position, the reversal is worth 2 points. Right. It used to be that the takedown and the reversal used to be were awarded the same. That's where I want my first question to lie. How do you feel, before we even get down to the near fall, how do you feel about a 3 point takedown? Positive or negative?
Completely positive.
You think so?
I do.
Okay.
And I struggled with it the year that college went to it. I'm old school, and I just didn't see the need to change what I thought was the greatest and oldest sport.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing.
Exactly. Then I had a conversation with a couple of officials that really kind of broke it down. Let's just say you take somebody down, right? It's 2 points. This is the old way. You cut him. You got 1. Take him down again. Cut him again. This guy only has to do 1 offensive move to tie the match.
Yeah.
So I think it's rewarding the aggressor for being the aggressor. So I love it. I think it changed the face of wrestling in a really positive way.
I agree. It changes the way I coach now.
Of course it does.
I used to, when I was in high school, I used to pick bottom all the time because I thought to myself, 1 point escape at least makes it a 1 takedown game where I can still win, right? So like if it's 0-0, I get the escape. Even if he takes me down, if I get an escape, we're still new. Like it's still now tied.
Yeah.
Right? Or if I get a reversal, I'm winning 3-2. So I always pick bottom. Now I'm changing it. I'm like, guys, I emphasize takedowns much more this year than any previous year because of the 3 point takedown. Now, to my own detriment, I don't think I spent enough time on the scrambles and the ground wrestling. I'm learning from that mistake. But I agree with you. I also think that it makes for a more exciting sport because the incentive structure is there now for the takedowns. Hey, you can't be the recessive wrestler waiting to scramble. You're going to have to push the pace and go.
Exactly.
Do you think that something could be done also for cautions for stalling to also kind of help with that? So for those that don't know, you can, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. You're an official, you know this better than me. You can give on the first caution, you can give a point, right? On the very first one.
No.
No, they changed that?
Nope.
That's always
First
been the
one
case.
is always a caution,
No matter what.
no matter what.
No shit. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah,
I thought
it's
you
okay.
could give the point even on the first one.
No.
Do you think that they should be able to give a point on the first stalling call?
No.
Why not?
I think we're still looking at 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. I think we're still in a position to educate and teach, honestly. Like there were years when stalling was huge in Missouri, way more than it ought to be. It's gotten better. Ask Taryn Woodley. I think he spent 2 years of eligibility at Mizzou trying to get out of bottom because he'd never been ridden before. Because they never let anyone ride on tap, which is stupid in my opinion, but nobody asked my opinion. So no, I do think, I think that warning is still justified. Not everyone is brilliant at this. I do think as an official, I'm really careful about when I hit that first one. I mean, obviously if it's there, it's there. You can't run, you can't hang. But you call that first one in the first period, that could bite you by the third period. You've got to be real careful in your selection. You're not careful to call it, but you need to be reviewing that entire match in your head the whole time you're out there. I am talking to myself, this one shot here, this one did that, this one back to the line once, this one back twice. So I'm constantly saying that in my head so that when I do go there, when I do make a stall call, they know it's coming. I'm very verbal.
Yeah,
I
you
will
are.
say,
You're a great ref about that.
stay in, work here, do that. And I think it's, again, for me, it's like parenting. I think I'm not coaching, but I am telling them what my expectation is.
Yeah.
And if they choose not to do it, then we'll go there.
No, I liked your thought about that, and actually hearing it changed my thought. I would have told you that I think that it's acceptable for the first caution to not be a caution, to be a point, but I never thought about the variable of also trying to educate. And you're right, that is a portion of it.
And I you may find somebody that says that's not my job as a referee, but I think it is. I think it's my job as an adult. Whether I'm on the whistle, whether I'm sitting in the corner. I think it was 10 years ago, it was really difficult to expect a 16-year-old kid to put a leg in and figure out in 20 seconds how to use it. It takes time.
Yeah.
But that's what stalling was in Missouri 10, 15 years ago.
That quick? That quick? Like it would be called that quick?
Yeah, horrible. There was a match that my son wrestled in high school, took him down 8 times and cut him 7. So we're 16-2. Very offensive. He was just really good on his feet. We get into the third period. He's up 16-7. He chooses bottom. He's got a great short sit out. He was hit for 1, 1, and 2, meaning a point, and 2 points in less than 15 seconds.
How? That's insane.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's stalling. That's bias.
He just scored 8 takedowns, unanswered.
That's insane.
It's interesting, and I'm really good friends with this person.
The person meaning the official that did that,
Correct.
the 1-1-2.
Yeah. Good man.
Did you ever ask him, like, yo?
It's interesting because that was my first year officiating.
Okay.
And we would go to our meetings, and the person that ran our association at the time said, hey, bring videos. We'd be happy to go over those things. I brought the video because I couldn't understand how this happened. And, I mean, everybody kind of jumped on his bandwagon and said, I said, what's he supposed to do? He's on bottom.
Yeah.
What's he supposed to do to get what? It should be up.
First of all, 3 calls in 15 seconds. You don't even have enough time to, like, adjust the game plan. Like,
Correct.
if you give me the caution call, okay, whatever it is I'm doing, I need to adjust.
We're still in the down position.
Yeah. like, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you can't get called 3 times. 3 times in 15 seconds is insane. For those that don't know,
After you
a total
dominated.
match is 6 minutes long if it's not a wrestleback.
Correct.
Wrestlebacks are 5 minutes. So it's
Right.
like 15 seconds in a 2-minute period. That's a small window.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
And they all kind of sided, and we had a very well-known, very well-respected official who became an evaluator, and he looked at the video and he said, well, his first move should have been up. I said, but his method of up was a short sit-out, right? And then up. Well, no, it should have been up.
I don't like that.
No, I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
And it convinced me at that point that I could be a better official.
Ah, God bless.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I love the sport. The person that came to me initially and said, you know, your son's going to graduate this year. We'd like to bring you along and we'll take care of you. We'll teach you all the things. And my comment was, the moment some coach yells at me from the corner and I'm no longer having fun, I'm out.
That was your comment.
And he said, we'll take care of it. So we go out, I do my first duel. He's on the outside. He's there to help me out. Did I get yelled at? Yeah, because I sucked, honestly.
It was your first year, second year.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But the revelation in my mind when I was done was, wait, this is not about me. It's about these two kids in the sport. And so that fueled me at that point to get better, to be better, because they deserved the very best official for 6 minutes I could give them. And that was my fuel in the very beginning. Still is. They still deserve the very best any official they could have for 6 minutes.
Before I get on to the 4-point near fall, I just want to kind of piggyback
Yeah.
off of this conversation about stalling and caution. At what point do you as an official also, because you're watching the same match I'm watching as a coach or as a spectator, you know that, and I don't have a better way to describe it than how I would naturally, is stalling may be the more advantageous or high IQ point at this point in time. Like, let's say it's 5-3 with 30 seconds left in the match and both neutral, you're going to be circling. You're not even looking for that.
Heck yeah.
You're going to call it still, but has it ever, I want to be careful how I articulate this question. Have you ever seen that, known what they were doing, and then maybe pulled a call? Because it's like, even if I give you a caution, it's not going to make a difference. Or even if I give you a point, it might not make a difference.
No, but I think a lot of young officials make that gratuitous call. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Just throw it up there because it's not going to hurt anything?
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people do.
Okay.
And
That's a factor, right? It's like, yes, you're watching what's happening,
Yes.
but it's also in the broader context of like, is this a semifinal match? How much time is it left in the match? Like, is it 30 seconds? Like, even if I call it, it's just gonna be a caution anyway. Like, and then so maybe you delay it, and maybe that could have been the difference. If it was two calls.
There's a lot of younger officials, more green officials, I guess, that will make that call. I think everybody's gonna. This is the one point of the sport that brings about the most debate, contentious feelings. It's all about stalling. Yeah, I mean, I've made it if I had to. If we're 30 seconds, first of all, he's earned that 5-3. Now, does he have the right to literally run circles? No.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull the trigger there, but be creative.
Yeah.
I think you find collegiate guys are much better about
Strategic stalling.
staying in the center of that mat. And it used to be where the rule book had you wrestling aggressive in the 10-foot circle. 10-foot circle doesn't exist any longer. That's not in the rule book. So you cannot, as an official, you cannot quote, hey, you're supposed to be wrestling aggressively in the 10-foot circle. That doesn't exist anymore. So be smart, but that's a coaching thing. That's what a coach teaches a kid.
Girl, I try.
But I mean, there's got to be some.
I got some kids on my team that, oh my God.
Well, I think those kids exist everywhere, but I do think a good coach has a game plan for short time, right?
Yeah.
Or you're up by those 3 points, and sometimes you just have to be bold and say, "Don't lock up," right? You've got to tell your kid. But in the practice room, I think there needs to be a real drill about what you do in those last 20 seconds when you're up.
I'm telling you right now, it's exactly what we had.
Yeah.
Some days I was like, okay, boys, we're going to do an hour on strategic stalling.
That's it.
30 seconds on the clock. Ride out your guy. You're not even worried about scoring or turning him over. You're up by 1. They get out. It's neutral. You're going to overtime.
Go to one side. Go to the other side.
Exactly.
Do a little. Make it look
Make
good.
it look like you're working for the power half. You don't even care if you get it.
Yeah.
Or like just grab a wrist and give a short grunt like you're trying to make something happen.
And I think when kids don't do that, I think that's a coaching error.
Yes.
That has to be instructed to them as to how to get through those last 20, 25 seconds.
If you were an official, what would you want to see kind of thing? If you were officiating your match, what would you need to, at minimum, see to not get that call? Mm-hmm. That's how I always thought about it.
Yeah.
I do want to move on to the 4-point near fall. Because this is the thing that, okay, in isolation, both the 3-point takedown and the 4-point near fall make sense to me. My only argument or the only reason why I was like, what the hell, was to do them both in the same year. To adjust the 4-point near fall and the 3-point takedown.
Wow. See, I think that's the perfect time.
Really?
Yeah. Tell me why.
I'll explain.
Okay.
I think wrestling, one of the beautiful things about wrestling is the fact that you could be losing 14-0 and still get the pin and win. It's one of the rare sports where, like, if you're up 49-0 in football and there's 30 seconds left on the clock, people are starting to walk off. There's no way.
Here. It's all right there.
So, like, I like the idea of, I want to give the aggressive wrestler what they've earned, because they've earned it. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to make 1 or 2 mistakes the end of the match. Because now with the tech fall, so, like, this is my thing. To do it in full context.
Okay.
It used to be that if I got a takedown and the 3-point near fall, I would have to get a couple of those in succession, or maybe like I turn you over, get a couple more near fall points, what have you. I was still earning it, but there were still more opportunities for that guy to get back in the match.
Yeah.
My one complaint with the 3-point takedown and the 4-point near fall is, in my opinion, because of the tech fall, which is a delta of 15 points, matches are over very quickly.
They are.
And
they are.
I just...
Never looked at it like that.
It's just weird because it's like, I've had matches where I was down 12-0 or whatever. I was just getting dogged, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to hit this fireman's carry.
Right.
Let's pray to Jesus. You know what I mean? The problem with the 3-point and the 4-point takedown and near fall is, now with a takedown into the back and back points, now the score is 7-0, 7-1.
We're halfway to attack.
We're already halfway to a tech fall.
Never thought about that.
That's just my... And I would love to hear your rebuttal for, like, why you did like it. But for me, my mentality was always like, if you're going to limit this sport with the tech fall in terms of delta and points, then you got to make it at least a game to get there.
Attainable.
At least a game to get there. This is now just too easy. Or maybe, like, keep the point system now, make the tech fall 20 points.
There's been a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk. I don't know that it's from NFHS. There's been a lot of local discussion about how to make that change. I think one of the things on the recent questionnaire from NFHS that was put out at the end of the season was maybe making what we felt about making the reversal 3 versus reversal 2.
Because then it still doesn't do the thing you were talking about earlier where the escape is still 1. So if the reversal is 3 and the takedown is 3, if you get a takedown, 3-0,
right,
an escape is still 3-1.
Right. But let's just say you're still in a referee's position, somebody's in control, and you're the defensive man. A lot of good work on bottom can still net you 3 reversal.
Yeah.
I would be in favor of that, really, for the reason that you're just talking about.
Well, then don't you think that that's just okay, but then... Yes, okay, but now we're just basically inflating the point system, and so long as the tech fall remains a 15-point delta, they will happen more. I would be curious to see, like, I'm a data guy. That's what I do for work. Yeah. I'd be curious to see, like, the number of tech falls year over year, and I'd be curious to see how 2024, 2025 stacked with previous years. It's got to be just a straight line
absolutely.
up.
Yeah.
Is that what we want? Is that what we want for the sport? Do we want there to be more tech falls?
I've never thought of it like that. I'm going to have to ponder that one a little bit.
And
No,
I
it's
can
not
see-
a bad point.
I can see the other argument and being like, well, Arion, yes, for some wrestlers, there's still a chance. But what happens when you got the senior versus the freshman who won't give up the pin? And this is now an easier way to get him out, and he's going to receive less damage on his shoulders and all this other stuff, from power halves or what have you. And then my rebuttal to that would be, don't fucking wrestle. It's not the sport for you.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
True.
Like, I want to
It's
give,
not easy.
even if it was done to one of my kids, I want to give that guy the most, like the most amount of opportunities to switch that game.
But is there not an opportunity from bottom to score that 3? If that reversal goes to 3?
Yeah, I mean, you could, but then fair. So then why not just keep them 2-2? Like, if that's the goal. So like we moved takedowns to 3 and then we moved reversals to 3, then what was the point?
Yeah.
But I guess to your point, it was like the takedown scenario you said, where like, I get a takedown, I let you up. I get another takedown, I let you up. Well, now it's still a 1 takedown game. So I think the 3 and 3 with the 1 escape still solves that problem of like, take a takedown 3, escape 1. I get a takedown 6, escape 2. It's not a 1 takedown game, because then that's 6-5.
And then not everyone dominates on their feet. I mean, there's some really great mat wrestling. There are some incredible things that you can do on bottom. And I'd like to reward that. I don't know that that's the answer, but I think not giving credit to the guy that works like hell on bottom, and maybe give him 3 instead of just the 2. I don't know. It's interesting.
Fair,
No,
and by the way, I don't know if I'm right on any of these things.
yeah,
This was my mentality. I was like,
Yeah.
man, we're getting out of these matches like way too fast.
They're quick.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Let the kids wrestle. Because going back to your thing about education, there was a lot of things that I learned. I never did Little League. I got in my freshman year thanks to Devon Ford.
Good dude.
Yeah, love
Gosh
that man.
darn.
Like a father to me. There was a lot of things that I learned in the matches, those prolonged matches. And a lot of times I was getting my ass whooped. But they had to earn every point and all these other things. I know for a fact I would have been on the mat less clocked time with the point
Had it
system as
been
they are
like
now.
now.
And I don't know if that's a good
And
thing or a bad thing. I don't know. But I think
Having never wrestled, I don't think I've looked at it from that perspective. It's interesting.
yeah.
It's really interesting. I've seen incredible matches as a district many years ago, sitting on the sidelines, getting ready to rotate in on the next match. I watched 2 St. Charles West wrestlers on 2 different mats. The assistant coach was on this mat. Craig Martin was on this mat over here. And
Who
this
was the
kid
head coach?
Huh?
Who was the head coach?
Oh, yes, exactly. And this kid was the kid on the mat that he was not coaching was down 14-1. Craig finishes on this match. He changes chairs, goes over with his assistant, yells out one thing. That kid ends up pinning and he wins.
Yeah.
He's down 14-1. So I don't know how attainable or how your scenario changes things, but I've just seen incredible things that a coach can say. I don't know if he even yelled anything that was significant, but whatever he said, and as soon as that kid heard his voice,
It worked.
it was like his wrestlers would do anything for him.
I just say this because my mentality is always like, so in business, we always say you never want to like, or just politics in general, you never want to legislate, you want to incentivize. Because I don't want to, I don't want you to do something because I'm telling you to do it.
Right.
I want you to do it because it's in your best interest. So then the question I have for us as like a wrestling community is like, what are we trying to do with this sport? Are we trying to teach these kids that like, I always liked wrestling because of the pin, the finality of it. And the tech fall was still there, and that's second best, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Are we teaching these kids like, hey, you don't need to pin or like put this guy on the back, score your points, which is a way of winning too. That's not a bad thing.
No.
It's just what are we trying to incentivize to the kids? Rack up points or get the pin, or get the pin.
Well, and the whole wrestling is about the fall.
Yeah,
Right?
that's how that was.
I mean, that's
That's how I remember it.
yeah.
Pop.
It's when the match. Wow.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No. I think it's great conversation. And I think having never wrestled, I don't have that I don't have that depth of perspective, and having to work like that. It's a great point.
I do think that it does make it more exciting to watch. I will say that, like, because the points are now more, the gap between a winner and a loser can now be eclipsed much faster, right? Like you could be down 5 points. That's a takedown and some near fall now, not like takedown and 3 near fall. So there's the ebb and flow to both.
I like it overall. I like it a lot. I think it's
does it make it easier because the matches end faster? I mean, like,
no,
logistically, like for tournaments and stuff like that.
No, because and maybe by themselves, yes, but that's never my perspective. From an official standpoint, what I'm finding is with these incredible numbers of girls, we're having to split them, obviously, because girls, most tournaments, they'll wrestle on a Friday night, and then the boys side wrestle on Saturday. We're refereeing till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night to try to get a girls' tournament that can't start till 4:30 on a Friday
because of school,
and get them done. So no, I don't think a short day is a plus in any way. I don't think that's how we don't get paid that way. We get paid by the tournament.
So whether it's 2 hours or 8 hours, you guys are getting the same amount.
I will blow the whistle till no one comes out on the mat. Do I think it's about finances for a lot of people? Yeah, of course it is. It's how the world is driven anymore. It's really not that thing for me. And I think most of my close friends, it's not like that for them. But it is, there's a lot of young people who just find it a great way to make a lot of money on a Friday and a Saturday. And the earlier they can get out, the better. And I see a long day meaning numbers, meaning we're on a positive note right now in wrestling. Our numbers are growing, our teams are growing, they're being added exponentially, and it's amazing.
I can tell
Our
you,
sport's in good hands.
Athens is a little bit more of a, this is like a nuance / anecdotal piece of evidence. I can see how much the wrestling team has grown in like the 2.5 years that I've been there. I mean, it was like we were struggling to fill up the lineup. Now we have like at least 1 or 2 kids in each weight class. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
And I think, and I don't think I'm giving credit unnecessarily, but the addition of women's wrestling, I think there's been a healthy competitive nature. You have this girls team that's got all this incredible focus. And then the boys team, you sort of, if you build it, they will come. And then they start competing with one another and become, they're teammates, obviously. And an athletic director doesn't care how he gets butts in the seats. But I'm telling you, they're coming to watch the girls.
Yeah.
And if you're smart as an athletic director, you've got a men's and a women's duel going on at the same time. And the stands are packed.
I hate to ask this way, but I don't know of a better way too. Yeah. Is there any part of you, maybe envious is not the correct word, but do you wish that back when you were in high school that the outlet would have been available to you in that manner?
Absolutely.
For women's wrestling to be its own separate entity, that you felt like you could actually go in and compete against other women?
Well, and I tell girls all the time, when you have your pre-meet, and as the head official, you have your talk about sportsmanship. My job is to keep you safe. Your job is to act accordingly and do all the right things. I always close by telling them what a unique, and there are girls wrestling now that don't know of a time when a girls team didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I always try to remind them of the privilege and the honor that they have to wrestle in this day and age, and just how it warms my heart to be able to watch them do this. And then I will usually close by saying that 50 years ago, I'd have kicked some serious ass. But that answers the question. I think I would have loved the opportunity to have a girls team. I'll referee anybody that comes on the mat, and I've had Randy Bouts back in the day. I had Ashley from Lafayette, and those are a few that could kind of handle themselves out there. But for the most part, I do like the separation. I think it's a level playing ground for everyone. I think most females when they get to about 120 pounds, after that, we're made differently for some really good reasons. And that's not to down anyone or to build up anyone, but we are different. Yeah. And so when guys begin to do this as they get older, it's a difficult thing pound for girls to compete with that.
Yeah,
There's always going to be a stud, but rarely can that happen.
It's always tough to say out loud because I always feel like it somehow diminishes the work the women put in. But it is just the case is like, dude, listen, you can do all the same work. You can put in all the same hours and all these other things. Genetically, it's just a different frame. It's a different skeletal structure. It has nothing to do with input or heart or understanding, like the IQ of wrestling, knowing the techniques and all this. It has everything to do with just the physicality.
I have always said, and I will say it every time anyone interviews me, up from 97 up till 2018, the coolest people I've ever met were wrestlers. I just love everything about them.
What do you mean by coolest? Like coolest? What is that metric?
Like that's
the
wholesome neatest. It's just the best human on the planet. They're hardworking, self-motivated, a little crazy, which I love. But it's people that I identify with on a very intimate level. I just love everything about the sport. I love everything about those wrestlers that I've encountered over the years. Now, since 2018, guess who gets the benefits of the sport? Women. So now the other 50% of the population gets those life lessons. It's all you. It's your work ethic. It's your fitness. It's your education. It's how much work do you want to put in it?
It's accountability.
It is. And I love the fact that women get this now on a level playing field. And it doesn't lessen the playing field. I just believe genetically it's now level.
Well, let me add a different paradigm to it now. You're also having, for the first time in human history, a generation of women that can legitimately defend themselves against untrained men. If you're a young girl, 130 pounds, but you know how to do a blast double on some concrete or whatever, in case an altercation ever does happen, you at the very least, I'm not saying you're going to beat up some 200-pound guy, but you can diffuse a situation pretty fast.
Yeah.
The same.
Just the mindset that you can.
Yeah. Well, and also the reality that you can.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
True.
It's like, I know I can, but then I actually
literally can.
And I listen, I have a daughter who's 2.5, and I'm kind of wrestling with this as a father because I want her to. She's in the princess phase now, Moana and Cinderella and all this stuff, and I love that. And I wrestle with her, and I get physical with my daughter because I want her to have everything, like in the sense of I want you to be catered to. I want you to feel like a princess. I want someone to be chivalrous to you. However, I also want you to be a bad motherfucker. And if shit goes south, I want you to be able to defend yourself.
Exactly.
I'm not raising a victim. I'm raising a woman. You know what I mean? That's the way I think about it.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I think I would subscribe to the same thought. In 2018, I had actually retired from officiating at the end of 2014, I did the state finals. I had been seeing someone, and he was an official as well in another state.
Gotcha.
And so we kind of back and forth quite a bit. And at that point, I figured we're spending 5 months of the year apart. So he decided to retire. I decided to retire. Unfortunately, the relationship only lasted 2 more years after that. And that was in 2014. I had breast cancer in 2015. And really didn't think after that physically I would be able to get back to it. Osteoporosis, the whole stuff that comes along with chemo and radiation. Anyhow, 2018 comes along and MESHA sanctions women's wrestling. And I just want to be involved. So I volunteer and I go do weigh-ins because no one could do a proper weigh-in at the time because we were still... we were still in locker rooms doing weigh-ins.
Let me add a little context to this. So for everyone, and let me add also the time frame. You're absolutely correct.
Yes.
When I was in high school, we never had to worry about female, or at the very least, there was like the 1 or 2 females. Yeah. So the way we did it was either the women weighed in first. They would go into the locker room. But here's the thing. they were still all male officials.
Yes.
And we would weigh in our underwear.
Oh,
and
my son weighed in and nothing.
Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. So, like, also very strict with the scale.
Yeah.
So if I weighed in, let's say I wrestled 119 and I stepped on the scale the first time, I was 119.1.
You knew what you had to do.
I was technically overweight.
Yes.
Now the officials would say, you have one more try. I could drop my drawers, which could be 1.2 to 1.1.
Absolutely.
And now I can make my weight. You can't do that because the way they do weigh-ins now is they go into the gymnasium, you have the singlet on.
You're in front of everyone.
Everybody's lined up, which I do like the transparency of that, by the way, that everyone's weighing in front of everybody.
I love it.
But, capital B, but,
Yes.
you have a gender now that is
Yeah.
different, and it's like, and I hate to make it like this, but it's also like in today's day and age of like hypersexuality and all these other things, it is good, I don't care what anybody says, it is good to also remind ourselves that there is something about like the sanctity and the chasteness of it. I would, if my daughter was a high school wrestler, I want a female ref. Yes. I don't want a male ref. I don't. I don't want a male ref to do the weigh-ins. I want a female ref to do it.
And to your point.
I know that might sound bad.
No. Why would we look for trouble? Right?
Yes, exactly. Don't create the opportunities.
And 99.999 officials that I know, I wouldn't
have to worry
safe
about
around.
it.
Yes.
But that 1% is enough for me to say no.
And I knew at that time that girls were being weighed in by the math teacher or the health teacher, but a female, because they would just grab a female.
Okay.
And but all the things weren't being done that should have been. Skin wasn't being looked at. Nails weren't being done. So I started volunteering locally. I called Mesha. I talked to Greg Stahl at the time, and I said, this is what I'd like to do. Is that okay with you if I volunteer? He said, yes, we'd love it, but I'd like you to be certified.
What's the difference?
Just it lends a professionalism behind. I could sign that weigh-in sheet as a certified official.
Gotcha.
And I just wanted to make sure that the girls were done properly, right? I don't want them going out with nails because no one else knew. The math teacher didn't know that you shouldn't be wearing earrings. They didn't know that your nails had to be cut. So I want to be true to the sport. So I did that for a couple weeks, and then I couldn't stand it any longer. And now that I'm certified, I'm back on a whistle. And so I did a girls' tournament that first season, and it was odd. I've never had a gym full of girls, and it was early on, so their technique wasn't there yet. It was a lot of head and arms.
What are you trying to say? Head and arms aren't technical?
Oh yeah, well, I mean they're good to have when you're in that position, but usually no. And so I'm very verbal, and I will tell them to work. You know, bottom man, you need to come up. Top man, you need to come out to the side. So we're in this match, all girls, and they're kind of like this. They don't have any idea what they're supposed to be doing. But I have an offensive and a defensive wrestler just like that. And so I make the mistake of coming in and saying, okay, bottom man, which is stupid, but I that's all I ever knew. I said, bottom man, you need to come up. Top man, you need to come out and work for a fall. Top girl jumps off and sits in an Indian seated position, just sits. And her coach is like, what are you doing? She goes, she told me
she took you literally
to come out to the side. So I knew then that this was a whole other world.
It's nascent. It's young.
It is. And they've come so far, and I struggled with it because like they want to hug and stuff, and I didn't understand that.
You're talking about the girls like intermingling amongst each other. That is a culture shock for me.
But let me tell
They're
you,
all friends.
Yes, braiding each other's hair.
Yeah,
the whole
I'm
thing.
like.
But what I love about it is now that they know technique, now that they're chain wrestling. You know, if this Merkle doesn't work, then you've got to go to this, and they're able to do that now. They can do that, and then get off the mat and still be a girl and still be, and maybe I'm being politically incorrect, but I love the way that they can dissect themselves and be an utter beast on that mat. And then it's over and they go braid someone's hair.
I don't think
it's amazing.
I don't think that's political incorrectness. I think it's the proper way to live life. you can't be one. I'll say for men as well. I can't be a savage in all aspects of my life. I can't be this over machismo masculine asshole in everything that I do. I'm soft with my daughter and with my wife.
Yeah.
I'm stronger with the men around me.
But
You
but
have
wouldn't
to
you
adjust
agree?
that.
Wouldn't you agree though that in that setting, on a wrestling mat, that a guy, a boy, more times than not, will be a beast, win or lose, and then be angry and go off to the hallway and not be able to process it or get rid of it as easily as the girls can separate those two parts of their being. I think it's what's special about us.
What coaching girls wrestling and coaching boys wrestling has taught me is that everything that like the health books used to teach are absolutely correct. Like men's emotional intelligence
Yes.
at that young age is just so absent compared to where women are in terms of that developmental period.
And how
You're
to-
absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I've seen women lose the match like at state, like the blood round, right? Between meddling and not meddling. And they'll get off the mats, take off their headgear. Of course they're destroyed, they're
Yes.
crushed. But they just seem to handle it. Dude,
They can disconnect in a way
my
that-
boys cry and bitch and moan way more than the girls ever
Yeah.
did. The girls, I always have this saying with my wrestlers. I go, hey, win or lose, it's on to the next. Because that's how a wrestling tournament is. You win, guess what? Now it's on to the next. Now the matches only get harder. You lose, on to the next. Because now we're wrestling to stay alive. Regardless,
I tell
on to
these
the next.
girls all the time, and I talk to the guys as well. I adore high school wrestlers. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your name is. I don't care if you're male or female. I appreciate what they are both individually and collectively. But I talk to girls all the time at tournaments and just tell them, you
The girl wrestlers.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we have long conversations sometimes. Now I could walk in a wrestling room and boys and girls are working out and they're wrestling, they're drilling, and I can walk by and they'll go, "Sup, Barb?" It's the boys. The girls are like, "Oh my God, Barb, we love," and they're all over the place. But then they go right back and do what it is that they do, and I love it. I love their ability to do that.
That switch.
Yeah, they do. And that doesn't lessen the capacity of that male wrestler. He just doesn't know at that moment what to do with it.
It's interesting.
He will eventually, if he's got the right coach and the right parents. But they are very different. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I came to learn really early on just how incredibly special female wrestlers are in their ability to be both of those things on the same day, in the same hour.
I agreed with what you said earlier in a nonchalant, joking way where you're like, it's the only sport. I do look at wrestling as it's the one thing in high school that is truly different from everything else. It was at least for me. And I love now that outlet has expanded to both genders, both like for opportunities for the individual, yes, but also for the broader sense, the macro, what it means for a society.
Yeah.
Like you're going to have a generation of tougher mentally, physically, just a capable
Just a
women.
deeper human.
And I'll tell you what I'll do to men, because this is something that I think, I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, but I think the degradation of both genders has stimulated from over-sexualization, ease of access to sex, the erosion of the importance of women, and the, I want to be careful how I say this, forgive me.
Okay.
You cannot tie or separate sex and gender and the act of from the genders. And you have to realize that there's gender norms and all these other things. However, I often say that we are just symbiotic, preordained by God. I think I can only say this for myself as well. I didn't become the true man that I am until I had my wife, until I had this person that forced me in the best way, not like forced me, but forced me to become a better man and held me accountable and told me that she was there for me and let me take the risks and trusted me and all these other things. And then I saw in her all the things I needed in a partner, someone that could lay the foundation for a family with me, someone that I know if things went absolutely wrong, I could find solace and respite in, a sanctuary.
Yes.
I I like wrestling for women for a multitude of reasons for the individual. But more than anything, what I like is the trajectory it's going to have on our society. You're going to have a generation of women that won't take shit from men, and it'll force men to elevate themselves.
Yeah.
This girl doesn't need you. This girl is already confident. This girl's already physically capable and all these other things. You now have to offer more. You have to step up as a man.
You have to bring something
You
more
want
to
to
the
date
table.
her? You want to have sex
Yes.
with her? You want to have all these things? Well, brother, you better step that fucking game up, because now you have to
Yeah.
be twice the man you were, because she's twice the woman from previous generation. I'm not saying twice the woman from previous generations in a derogatory way.
I don't.
You
look
feel?
I don't look at the world like that.
Yes,
I
thank
don't look
you.
at you like that. Not
she's
at all.
she's capable.
Yeah.
So now you have to offer more. And I think once this generation of women really starts to, enter that stage of their life, because it was 2018. So you're having 18-year-olds now are like, what, 24, 25? So still
Out of
young
college,
women.
Yes.
Give it another 10 years. Give it 20
Yeah.
years. I think that expanding this sport to women is going to have like a ripple effect that's going to affect
Yes.
society as a whole for the better.
It's gonna affect their children.
Yes.
In years to come.
Yes.
I think that I think it enables, it encourages. I think it fills a woman in a way that maybe they hadn't been filled before. Just a confidence, right? It doesn't mean that you are better than. I don't know that it's going to make you an overall better human, but I think what the sport can give to young women empowers them. Number one, I think there's a path that they don't have to go down
Yes.
because they have this.
Or they could do both. You could be the cheerleader and the wrestler.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know what I
And,
mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not
the
not
path
binary.
I was speaking of was.
Oh, forgive
was
me.
Something else. Yes.
Forgive
Yeah.
me.
I think when
A little
you
bit more intense. Yes.
exactly. I think when you empower a female, I think she has options.
Yes.
And she has choices, and that's a great thing. I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian, so it is. I'll blow the whistle with no matter who comes out on the mat. But I did find making women's wrestling their own thing a really positive thing.
I agree.
My son had won a state medal his junior year of high school, placed third, and a couple of months later wrestled like AAU nationals or something because they happened to be in St. Louis. There was 3 girls, I think, that entered, and so I weighed in this girl. And I knew when she walked in that she was probably his weight class. And sure enough, she was. And he had never wrestled a girl. Most people had never wrestled a girl back then. And we get out on the floor, and I told him, I said, I weighed in this girl that's in your bracket. And he didn't say too much about it, and comes up, and they're wrestling each other. And he's like, Mom, what do I do? And I said, well, don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
But do what you do. She's got wrestling shoes on, a singlet and headgear, and so do you. So go out and I think he took it a little bit lightly. He didn't know what to do.
That's a tough one, right? Because
was
you're trying to
rarely-
teach him how to be a gentleman.
He was
but this
rarely
is competition.
Yes, exactly. He was rarely taken down, and so he gets out there, and all of his buddies are around the mat, and she took him down because he just didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And at that point, the light went, and he did what he needed to do to win the match. But it was a really difficult position to be in. I think it was probably difficult for her, honestly. It's very rare that I think that that's a positive thing for everyone.
I think separating the genders for sport actually does something else psychological as well, because I think putting them together actually separates them more than it. Okay, let me once again. I wanna
No,
be
but
careful
I'm
the words I'm using.
100%.
When you have a woman wrestling a man, what's the very first thing the men will do? Oh, you can't lose to that's a girl. You can't lose to her. And
You
all this
beat
other
her,
stuff.
so what?
And then if you, it's exactly, it puts these boys in this position where like, if I beat her, I'm the bully. If I lose to her, I'm lesser than.
I will never live this
And
down.
then for the girl, all she wants is just like, dude, let me wrestle. Like,
Yeah.
stop all this bullshit. So in a way, separating them just makes it better for everyone in that sense. Now, are there outliers? We said Randy Belts a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yes, there are the enigmas. There are the exceptions to the rules.
Yes.
But those are so few and far between
It
that
was
you can't use them.
extremely rare.
Yeah, you can't.
Ashley Hudson was
Yes.
a phenom. I mean, she was rare to be so athletically inclined, wrestled really well, and was still very much a female, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's, yeah.
Yes, a feminine. Yeah.
Yes.
I think, like I said earlier, I think we're going to feel the ripples of this in our society for years to come in a very positive way. I'm curious to see, because what will happen first is the action, right? That is women's sports.
And then the reaction.
Gaining wrestling. Now I'm curious to see what will happen with the reaction of men. I hope, I'm an optimist, that what they will be forced to do is step up.
Oh, I think so.
That's my hope.
The little bit that I've seen they have.
Yes.
I really do. And if I walk in a gym and we're getting ready to do weigh-ins for a duel or a try or whatever, there is a ton of integration
between
the
boys
and the girls. And they are, and I love it because it's based on athletics, it's based on sport, it's based on everything other than gender. I don't think
it's a band of brothers. You're going through the same shit I'm going
Exactly.
through. You're cutting weight just like I am.
love it.
You're in this practice drilling and you're sore and my knees hurt and your shoulder hurts. How can I not have mutual respect for someone doing the exact same things I'm doing?
And not only is that female a deeper, better human for this sport, I think the guys look at her as a more, I don't want to say valuable, but I think they see them in a light, in a positive way. They don't see them in a male-female kind of way.
No, I agree.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
I think I love the fact that you can be 16 and roll around on the mat and have fun and learn and drill and not do other things.
I think it'll teach men a lot about
I
mutual respect as well.
Absolutely do.
It goes back to that thing of there's many things that I like about gender norms. Like I do want the man to view himself as like a provider and a protector and be chivalrous and hold the door.
What
and
did
all
I
those
just
other
say?
things.
I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian. I get it.
I do like that. But I also would rather live in a world where the guy felt like he didn't have to do any of those things, but he chose to. Exactly.
Yep.
And that this woman can open her own door and can do everything else for herself. And you've seen her overcome physical boundaries that you wouldn't normally see. Because I don't care what anybody says, and forgive me for saying this. I've never looked at a cheerleader the same way I look at it as like a female wrestler. I never looked at a female soccer player. Maybe male soccer players and female soccer players have this hegemony as well. Duly noted. But for me, my bias is wrestling. I could tell you right now, I have more respect for girls wrestling than any other girls sport. The same way I have more respect for boys wrestling than I do. I'm sure football and hockey and all of them are hard. I think wrestling is the most mentally tough sport that has ever existed on the face of the earth.
Yes.
That's my bias.
I completely agree. And it's why I love it so much. And it's, in my opinion, there is no other sport.
Yeah.
I know. People would argue with that, but I see so many wonderful things that come out of this sport. And maybe it's because I'm focused on it. I'm sure football, basketball, all of those have their positive qualities as well. But
yes,
but I do see.
Listen, they're
crazy
all
benefits.
If zero is neutral, they're all greater than zero, but they're not greater than wrestling.
No, they're not. They're not.
If you don't mind, I want to take a small step back because you kind of passed over something nonchalantly, but it really hits home for me. You said that you had breast cancer in 2015.
I did.
Was this your? Are you comfortable talking about it? I just, forgive me.
Do I look like I'm uncomfortable talking about anything?
This is a little bit,
No,
I'm sensitive to the issue.
It's a big part of who I am.
So that was kind of what I was going to ask was, number one, was this the first time that you ever ran into this?
Yes.
So you never had cancer before?
No.
Anything in your family?
No, not at all. Literally watching television one night, rolled over, went to pull my pillow, and I missed the pillow, and it grazed what was an obvious, like someone had slid a pea right under my skin. And how did I not notice this before? And I went to work the next day and called my OBGYN at the time, and He said, well, if it's really that obvious, it's probably nothing, but why don't you come on over? We'll do an exam. So I went over that afternoon. He said, yeah, he goes, but let's just get an ultrasound and a mammogram and see what's going on. So I had, at that time in 2015, the new 3D mammogram at the time. It's commonplace now, and it missed it.
Wow.
Although it was visible and you could feel it, but it missed it. So I happened to work for a neurosurgeon at the time, and he called a friend who was a general surgeon in the other building from where I worked, and they made me come over. I'm like, no, just give me an appointment in a couple weeks. It's not a big deal. And I was in surgery a week later.
Wow.
I had the biopsy, opening day of the D1s.
Forgive me, just for some context. So he was telling you, no, like, come over today or tomorrow or whatever. Yeah. You were like, hey, it's not that serious.
Right.
But he was kind of emphasizing, no, like, I want to do this sooner rather than later. When they did find it, were they able to determine the stage?
Not initially. You don't do that until the tumor is out, and then they do the final pathology. So, I had the biopsy, fine needle biopsy, on the afternoon of opening day of the D1s when they were in St. Louis that year, because I had the biopsy and put an ice pack on and went to the Division I.
Jesus Christ,
opening
Barb.
round. It was awesome. It's in town. You have to go. And then the pathology came back the very next day, and I was in surgery on Monday.
What was going through your head when the pathology came back? They told you the news. What were you originally like? What's the first thought in your head?
Let's just get it out and deal with it. I mean, I was not, looking back, I think I was too green to be worried about it. I don't know. I wasn't panicked. It wasn't like that at all. I just said, let's get this out, because everything leading up to that had been, it's probably no big deal. And even when they did remove it on that Monday, initially he said, I don't see much in this that tells me that you'll need chemo. It's cancer, we know that. But then it did come back. Early stage, very early stage, but the proliferation rate of the cancer cells was very high and very fast. So
you caught it early, but you don't want to wait.
Correct. It just takes one of them little suckers to get somewhere. So just had a lumpectomy at the time. I had 4 rounds of chemo and then 33 rounds of radiation. Finished at the end of August of that year. Started out mid-March, D1s, and then finished in August. And I'll be 10 years this month. Yeah, I know.
God bless.
Praise God. It was really, I'm just bullheaded. I don't think I'm special in any way. I worked every day. I took off the day of surgery, came back the next day. I happened to work in a medical building for a neurosurgeon. So my chemo was every 3 weeks. I'd come in, I would clock in at 7. I'd go downstairs at 9 o'clock, hook up for 3.5 hours of chemo, and go right back to the office. And it's not that it was easy. It sucked.
Yeah.
But I do know that staying busy and keeping your mind busy kept me from thinking bad stuff. Like the weekends when I didn't work, you'd wake up and your foot would hurt. You're like, shit, I have foot cancer, right? Because that's where your mind is.
Yeah,
so the busier...
You're left alone with your thoughts.
Yes, the busier I stayed, the easier it was. And I worked in a medical office that was just really good about the girls helping me out and knowing that I needed to take a little bit of a break periodically. And so I didn't miss any work at all. I was radiated 33 mornings at 6:45. They came in early so I could clock in by 7. It was great.
Jesus Christ.
And it's easy to look back on it because I'm here to look back, right? So I have the luxury of being able to say, it was okay. It was all right.
You beat cancer.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty. When the morning I found out was ugly, they called and I was just initially I was okay until I had to call my kids
Yeah.
and tell my kids, who were already parents of their own at that point. So that was a little difficult. That's when you become vulnerable, when you're talking to your children. But it was not bad. Overall, it was not bad.
Well,
Yeah. Boy, that'll change your perspective.
dude, nothing like a brush with death.
And I honestly thought, I was grateful that my mother was no longer around, because I would not have wanted her to, not that I didn't want her with me, but as a mom, I could only presume what it would have been like to watch my children go through that. So grateful that my mom wasn't here, but my dad was here, went to chemo and sat with me and played cards and did the whole thing. And yeah, there's a lot of good if you look for it.
I agree.
Like we talked about wrestling stories. There's good in every tournament or duel that I go to. You just have to step back and look and find the great stories.
Listen, first, God bless.
Yeah, yeah,
I didn't know that you
yeah.
had went through that.
He's-
Never brought it up.
yeah.
So
That's. I mean, most of the wrestlers know, because Facebook, they see pictures that my kids or grandkids have posted way back when, but they Facebook stalk you and they see all that stuff, and so they know, and they've been really wonderful. Yeah.
I want to change the conversation
Yeah.
again. Forgive me, I didn't want to
No.
dwell on that. I was just curious.
Yes, good stuff.
One of the things I find extremely difficult for myself as a coach is to remain completely unbiased. Obviously, like, my job is to coach everybody, everybody from the freshman to the senior, right? And I know full well that I was that freshman that was like a little shit. If you would have caught me freshman year, I was a 500 wrestler, you would have never thought anything of me. But then just something clicked in me, and I was like, you know what? No, I want to be really good at this. And then I ended up being like one of
Isn't
our
that
school
magical?
studs. Absolutely. So I have to always, as a coach, like, combat those thoughts of like, oh, well, we got this, junior stud. I'm going to give him a little bit more time than this freshman. Then I always tell myself, like, I don't know what this freshman's going to be.
Right.
And I need to give him the exact same amount of time and effort that I should give to any kid or all the kids. The reason I bring up bias for myself is it's kind of easy for me because no one's got me under a microscope or like a magnifying glass. Like, if I fuck up one day and maybe I give a little bit more time to the seniors and the juniors, or maybe one day I do spend too much time with the freshmen and kind of neglect the older classes, no one's really holding me like my face of the fire kind of thing. Like, I'm not being held accountable every minute of every day. Yeah. However, officials, I mean, you can have 10 good matches that day where you're making all the right calls. Maybe you botch something up, and I mean, then you get the coaches yelling, you get the parents yelling, and all this other stuff. So I have two questions in tandem, but let me ask the first one. The first one is, how do you deal with bias? Are there schools and coaches that you might like based on, after having this conversation, I'm sure your relationship with me will only get better. Well, the next year when you're at Afton tournament or wrestling, like, you obviously have to combat some of those. Like, hey, Afton, cool school, but I'm going to call this as I see it. How do you combat, or how do you overcome just the bias that you have as a human being?
Personally, I think it's really easy. And if we'll go back to what I said earlier, it has nothing to do with any of that. It has everything to do with those two athletes and 30 some odd feet and 6 minutes, period. That means, and I don't know, maybe someone else would think differently of me, but we had a referees meeting this past season, and the guy running the meeting went around the room to some of the senior officials and said, what do you think your best quality is?
Oh, wow.
And it happened to be the meeting where two of your Afton wrestlers had come out, and which I enjoyed meeting them tremendously. And it has nothing to do with being all about me, but I think I have an incredible ability to hug everybody in that gym, and I do, because it's just who I am. And that's nothing but those kids for 6 minutes. And that was my answer to him. I said, I think I'm the most unbiased official you'll ever meet. It's difficult. I beat myself up over something that happened on that mat, never with a coach. I can always walk out of there. May not have always thought I was right, but I can always walk out and not be offended by what a coach said, or any interaction that I may have had at the table or from the corner from anyone. But I have beat myself up over a call that that I messed up, like big messed up.
That was going to be the second part of that question, was like, okay, the bias aside,
Yeah.
how do you combat with, because you're human, and something maybe one time you made a call too early, maybe one time you made a call too late, maybe one time you just made the wrong call.
So interesting. So every time a national anthem is played before a match, I am in prayer for probably the first half of it. And it is just thanking my God for that opportunity to be healthy, to be there. I ask him to give me the strength to call a good match, to be fair, to understand if I make a mistake and I have the ability, give me the courage to wave it off, to fix it, to do whatever's necessary. I usually conclude that by saying, between God and I, that please let everybody in this room know whose I am. I want them to know I'm genuine, that I'm a believer. Do I have a rough mouth? Yes. I'm working on that every day. But I want them to know my heart and who I am as a human being. So to that end, and that's really how I view everything. I have had, so if I have the ability, if I have those couple extra seconds to wave off that takedown that just wasn't there yet, you get better at it as you get older, and the verbiage is let it burn, let it just roll out. It'll make the call by itself, and then I look like a rock star when I put up 3. But I did a match in Kansas City years ago, and St. Louis official and I get to the gym. It was at Winnetonka High School, and we're walking across the gym to go downstairs into the locker room, and there was a Lindbergh was there at the time, and there was a kid on the team, still don't know his name, but we just always had a nice little fun relationship. I could always call them match, but he was a great kid. As I'm walking across the gym floor, he says, "There's my favorite referee." So I go down, I change clothes, I'm ready. We call the 2-day tournament. I'm calling.
Was this a girl or a boy?
It was a boy. This was years ago.
Okay.
And calling the third place match, and I'm inside, and I have a senior official, by senior meaning many more years than me, as my outside. And
before we continue this, just elaborate what the difference between inside and outside is for someone that might not know.
Yeah. Inside official makes every call. I've got the whistle. I'm calling the match. My assistant is there to do things that maybe I cannot see. Action goes away from me, and there's a clasp, or the throw goes away from me. Wrestler's in near fall criteria. He can actually begin that count while I go around. He's looking for a caution on a start, a wraparound, just a second set of eyes for illegal, for cautions. They play a really big role right now in the boundary line, because if I have an assistant, I'm looking at near fall out of bounds. He's looking at that toe to be able to tell me
when it's out,
when we're out.
Yeah,
exactly.
Forgive me, I just wanted to
no.
context.
That's a good point.
So you're the one who has full autonomy of what is made.
Everything.
But like if you see the outside, because he's usually on the opposite side of you, so that you guys can get a 360-degree view of the match.
Correct.
He'll throw the clasping sign up. You might not see it. You're taking his.
Absolutely.
You're like, okay, you see it? Cool.
Right.
I'll make the call.
Because you know, I can't be everywhere.
Exactly.
And if a guy does a sit out and he turns this way and I'm over here,
they're small guys and they're athletic.
Exactly.
So forgive me, because you were telling your story, but I wanted to add context.
So we're in the third place match. I call what I think, I still believe to this day, was a solid takedown and would have won the match. And my assistant didn't have it. And he looked at me, and we train.
Is it outside of the mat? What were the variables that made you think it was, and what were the variables?
Oh, I had a cross face and I had an ankle hooked.
Oh, so you're like, that's takedown.
Yeah. We're not on our butt. We're up, right? We're hips on hips. And we train as assistants to be able to maybe glance at someone and that assistant goes, "I want to talk about that." And I'm open, right? I want to be an official that's open. I'm not always right. So we walk over and he said, why do you have two there? And I told him, and he goes, just because you hook that ankle doesn't mean it's two. And he's a very senior official and a very well-respected one. I still felt confident in my mind that I had it, but I want to be the official that talks it out, and I said to him, I said, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yes." So I took it back. I was booed unmercifully. Kid ended up losing the match. And I walked off, and there happened to be a local college coach that was there recruiting. And as I walked, and he was a real good friend of mine. He was my son's high school coach. And when I walked off the mat, he goes, "Boy, you effed him." And I knew in my head that I was probably right, and then that just solidified it. And tournament ends, and I cried for 3.5 hours home.
Caveat.
Yeah?
What if you were wrong and everybody else in that gym was wrong as well? What if that other ref was right?
Well, I mean, I know, but I should have stood my ground, but I want to be the official that listens. I want to be the official that, because I've had people that I've been on the outside and they don't want any of my opinion. And I think an assistant serves a very valuable role.
I agree.
And so I trust the process.
Forgive me. It sounds as if you hold yourself accountable for this because there are two referees. You are the main, he is the assistant. And these are the only two opinions that truly matter.
Yes.
Yet it sounds like outside of that, you're letting kind of the opinion of the masses dictate how you thought, whether or not you thought
correct.
it was in or out.
The opinion of that particular guy as I came off the mat had been a 20-year friendship of mine. He was my son's high school coach.
And he was telling you, no, that was a takedown.
Yeah, we were close enough that good enough friends that I valued his opinion. And so I cried for 3.5 hours home, cried. And I got home. I was able to get the phone number for the athletic director at Lindbergh, who was Mike Slyman. It was legendary in the sport. And I told him what happened. I said, "I'd really, really like if you could find this kid tomorrow and just tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to listen to my assistant, and I think I was wrong. And just tell him, just apologize for me." He goes, "Barb, first of all, you got to let it go. You're going to make those. We're all making those." But I just felt horrible. So this was probably mid-season. Fast forward to the state tournament at the Hearn Center, by the way. That's how long ago it was. You know how you could walk in the Hearns and you knew where every school was going to be sitting. Everybody was in their regular spot. So I wasn't officiating that year. I was rotated out. I waited till he was done. He placed 5th. And so I went over to his coach and said, "Is he done?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you mind if I talk to him?" He said, "Sure, go ahead." I went over and I said, "Congratulations. I'm so happy for you." And I lost it. And I said, "I still feel horrible. It's hard now to talk about. I'm really sorry." He goes, "Barb, don't worry about it." He goes, "As soon as I come off the mat, my teammates were all, 'Man, she effed you.'" And he goes, "You want to know what I told him?"
I should never put myself in that position.
"She's still my favorite."
Oh, what? Really? God bless.
I can't. Yeah. That is, those are the things I walk away with all the time. Not usually crying for 3 hours, but there's always a redeeming moment when I learn something about myself or a wrestler teaches me something that I couldn't even see at the time. Yeah, it was big. It was a big one.
When I was younger, I didn't really have too much affinity for the officials or anybody else that made it happen because I thought to myself they were a means to an end, right? Like I was like, the ones that really make a difference are the coaches, because they're the ones that are putting in the time. It wasn't until I got a little bit older, like that was my freshman year. Then by like junior year, senior year, I was starting to talk a little bit more with some of the refs, because like you see each other every year. And I had one ref come up to me, I remember my junior year, and he goes, "You might be one of the most like improved wrestlers I've ever seen in my life, from like freshman to now." And I was like, it blew my mind, because I was like, I didn't even know you guys were
They're looking
watching.
at you in that way. Yes.
And I was like, it just kind of changed. It made them more human.
Yeah.
It made all of you more human. And then in that, it made me accept that. So like, I used to get angry at bad calls. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, what are you watching? Then after he made that comment to me, I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're just like me. They might get nervous before a match too, like a high level match, a state medalist versus a state medalist.
Every tournament still.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be the state tournament, just a tournament. Because I want first of all, I know the value. I know the importance of what is going to happen. Not just my match, but I know what I'm going to witness and what these kids do and what this means to them. And I want to be everything that they need and everything that they deserve.
Wrestling is also an interesting sport in the sense, like every other sport has multiple officials.
Yeah.
So like
football, they're all over the field.
Yeah, even in volleyball, they'll have line judges, right? So like they'll have the main, and then they'll have the line judges. In football, they have what? Like how many is there on a football field? 5, 6,
Yeah, on a crew.
On a basketball court, I know there's always more than one. So it's like there's kind of like this diffusion of responsibility, because you're not the sole person. Yeah. Now, in high key matches, state, championship matches at tournaments, you'll get the main ref and the assistant ref. But for the majority of the matches you're going to referee, it's just you. Yeah. Your call.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, we were talking about how wrestling is an individual sport. And in some ways, you could also say that the officiating for wrestling is an individual endeavor.
I thrive on it.
You like that?
I do. I mean, I love the idea and the benefit of having an assistant in some of the high level stuff, because technique increases as you get into, district finals, sectionals back in the day, blood rounds, semis, everything just amps up a little bit. So just the slight chance that in that scramble that a knee goes away that it shouldn't go, he can see it maybe where I can't. So I think that's valuable to have, but I don't mind at all being out there by myself.
Yeah.
But it takes time. There's a local guy who's now back into officiating. He officiated for a short period of time, and then his kids got into school, and now that his kids are all gone, he's back calling matches again, and he's incredibly good. But his very first duel, he was the junior official, so he had the freshman, I had the JV, and then I did the varsity. And in between, he's like, how are you not a sweaty mess? He was red, he was soaked, he had all the things. And because you tend to run circles, you learn eventually, right? Number one, back up. You got a much greater field of vision when you can back away from the action. But it's learning the sport and anticipating where that move's going to go.
Yeah, you have to educate yourself.
You do. I think the difference between a good official and a great official is knowing the moves and knowing that somebody who wants to start a cradle but can't quite get it, what are they going to go to next? They're going to go to a barbed wire. So you got to put yourself in a position where you're over then to be able to watch.
You know where it's going to go next.
Because they're going to go. And they're, and I think that's the thing that took me years to figure out, because I hadn't wrestled, right? So it was just a matter of, I think officiating is much like wrestling.
Barb, I know a lot of wrestlers that wrestled that still haven't figured it out.
Yeah, true. You're not wrong. But it's mat time as an official, no different than it is for an athlete. The more matches I can get in before the season starts, challenge matches.
You get the reps in.
I will go anywhere. I've contacted half a dozen schools and said, I'll come do your challenge matches. This year especially, because I needed to be able to do the 3 before I actually got out there for a paying duel. And it was far more natural than I thought it was going to be. But it's about mat time. And I love it.
You briefly brushed over this off the record and on the record, and that was kind of like this next generation of not just officials, but officials, but coaches. Like we're talking about officials right now, but I mean it's just the next generation in general.
Yeah.
You, at one point in your life, were the one who was mentored and taken under the wing of the older guard, and now you find yourself in kind of the opposite situation, opportunity.
Yeah.
Where now you're viewing some of the youth, some of the younger officials, high schoolers doing Little League wrestling, officiating, younger officials in high school, right? How do you now view the role of mentorship to other officials? Is it something you enjoy? Is it something that you want to do? Has it been asked of you? Do you feel like you have to insert yourself? How is this new role within a role working for you?
Yes, and no. So I just know how valuable it was to me. I try not to interject myself because not everybody wants it. And I think culturally, that's the difference in the landscape right now. High school students will ask me questions all day. I play pickleball every week, and we were all sitting at the bar afterwards last Monday, and this little waitress came up and she goes, "You're the referee?" Yeah. She goes, "Well, you said one time at our tournament that, doesn't everyone want to be like Barb?" And so I'm constantly trying to recruit officials. And she goes, I'd really like to do that. Would you? Yes. So we traded phone numbers, and I said, I will link you what you need to register with MESHA. I will then get you hooked up with the guy in our area that schedules all the little, she's still a high schooler, so she can only officiate youth wrestling. But yeah, like I said, Mercury and
P-Hop, Patrick.
yes, and his friend, and at the end of our meeting that night, they were the most inquisitive and intelligent questions of the group at the time. And so I went up to them later and said, "Look, if you ever have a question, I would really hope that you don't feel awkward about asking." But most people, and it's not high schoolers, it's those that are in their 20s and 30s. The general feeling is they don't need to get better. And they do.
Ooh, really?
No, yeah, sadly. Yes.
And you said that that's kind of like a cultural thing? So
I think it's different than back then.
Yeah.
I think there was a group of us that came in about the time that I did. Most of them were younger. I was older at the time. I was in my 40s already. But it was just an incredible network of being able to ask questions. And we were on the phone every night with one another. And I think I've come to the conclusion, along with some of my fellow officials that are all in the same category that I'm at, level-wise, that we try to hold little clinics and things to bring our newer ones along, and they're evaluated by state evaluators, and they don't listen.
That's interesting.
It's really sad. And I will go back, and not that their heart's not in it, but I do think it's very much an ego and a financial thing, and not about really wanting to get better.
Meaning they're just trying to make money from officiating?
I think that's one of the things, and the ego prevents them from asking questions.
Are these also former wrestlers by any chance?
Yes.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yes.
I would have thought the opposite.
No, I'm hoping that with time they're going to get past that 20-something, right?
Yeah.
And it's not everyone. It's not.
No,
it's
that's not what I'm
blanket,
saying either. Yeah.
But girls, women, and I can only give my perspective. They're far more open with me. Maybe they just associate because I'm a girl. I don't know what it is, or I make them more comfortable. I don't know what it is. But we've had evaluators that have tried to talk to some of the younger officials, and they don't ever seem to take the criticism or the opportunity at being talked to by an elder official and they don't seem to take it to heart like I wish they would.
That's wild.
Yeah.
In my professional realm, I have benefited immensely from key mentors, like key times in my life, like entry level positions, mid level positions, and where I'm at now. I've had a mentor every step of the way, and I've been blessed and lucky to have.
Well,
that.
and I think the cream will always rise. You will always get this handful that soak up that information. But I think the division between that cream and those that don't want to listen, that gap is huge.
That's why it's interesting that some of these guys are wrestlers, because I think we all remember the time where we didn't know anything. Before I was ever the hammer, I had to deal with being the nail. So like everything else that I'm doing in life, I still have that same mentality. This is a new thing. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, just like I didn't know what the hell I was doing back then. But if someone's willing to take me under their wing and be like, hey kid, don't make the same mistakes I did, I'm going to listen.
And I think that will come. I think if we go back to some of the first conversation, I think the maturity level of being able to take that in
Criticism
for a male might be a little bit different. And at least my observation, and I see it all. I do think they come around. Those that are beginning to rise to the top are well in their 30s.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I do.
I'm also 32, so maybe there's something to that.
So yeah, I do think it's just an age thing. I don't think it's necessarily, well, it is male female, but I think it's because the females mature, I think, at a little bit earlier time frame than the guys, and they have to experience a little bit more to be able to grasp and understand the value of having that mentor. That's why I was so taken by your two wrestlers that came to that meeting, because they were, I mean, the question that, I can't remember if it was Mercury or the other kid, that what he texted me a couple of days later was, so in preparing, is there anything, what do you think I should have in my wrestling bag? It wasn't about a call. It wasn't about a rule. It was, how do I prepare? I was so taken by that. I said, well, you need an extra pair of pants. You need all the things. You keep your disc and your wristbands and your whistle separate so you're not searching, and have your bag ready in your car every morning. You may get that last minute call. Hey, we had somebody cancel tonight. Can you make this
Show
duel?
up, yeah.
Be ready. But I've never had anyone ask me that. And yeah, some of the questions were really bottom line, not about rules, which I thought was lovely. They wanted to prepare, which is what I expect out of a wrestler. How do I prepare to be good at this?
The reason I started coaching was just because Devon Ford asked me, hey, we need a younger coach that can go in there and roll with the guys, and we need some help. And if anybody else other than him would have asked me, I would have said no. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the inclination.
Wow.
I used to just come back to help with Afton tournament, because you need table workers, you need this, that, or the other, and it helps if someone already knows the rules and everything.
It does.
And I told them, I was like, hey, every first week of December, you'll always have me so long as I'm in town. You know what I mean? And then after Afton tournament 2.5 years ago, he was like, hey, do you mind doing this? I go, because it's you, I'll do it. Started coaching. And the reason for starting to coach and the reason I'm coaching now are vastly different. And it is all the kids. And it's in a weird way, it's given me so much more optimism for a lot of the pessimism that I see in our world in other aspects of life. Political, business, all this other stuff. It's like, problem.
There's a lot of good in these kids. There's so much good.
They're sharp. They have so much potential, and it makes me so excited. That's the thing. This is my first year where like I've lost like one wrestler last year, you know what I mean, a couple girls and stuff like that. But now we're also having some of the guys that like I've coached for a long while graduate. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you guys are so prepared for all the shit that life is about to throw at you. I cannot wait to see what you become.
Coming.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And now the reason that the reason why I want to coach next year and why I started vastly different. Now I'm thinking to myself, like, I want to be there for these kids. I want to see them progress. I want to see them achieve whatever it is their goal could be. I just want a winning season. I want to medal at state. I want to get to state, whatever that is.
I approach officiating much like I did parenting. To me, it's no different. I have very clear. I was a disciplinarian. Both of my kids will tell you. I had very clear expectations, very clear parameters at which my kids were to behave and their accountability. And I think I think kids like boundaries. I think kids like
discipline.
They do. And I've watched a lot of people officiate, and when I tell wrestlers stay in, they stay in. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the way that I command it. They listen really, really. They want to please me. I may be shooting myself in the foot here, but I think because I set some very clear expectations, I don't tolerate the slap of the hand at the end of the match. You're going to come back and shake a hand like an adult, period.
There's something to be said about the transparency and understanding. So when you say, like, you know, they want to please you, it's not so much that they want to please you as much as you've set the boundaries, you've set the terms.
True.
So if an official does not set a standard, then
Like a parent.
then whenever something happens, you might feel wronged because you didn't understand the rules that you were going into, right?
Yeah.
But if a standard had been set, or
A
an
clear
expectation, then when a call is made or a disciplinary action is taken, you have no one to blame but yourself. And there's like a solace to that. You didn't call caution because you hate me. You called caution because I was backing up.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't give the takedown because, you know, you think lesser of me. You called the takedown because this guy took me down. Yeah. It's just you remove that bias or even the perception of it because the clear boundaries and goals were set.
Yeah.
And I think everybody enjoys that, not just kids, but adults and
True.
Especially kids. But I don't know.
If it's clear, I think 9 times out of 10, they will achieve the level.
Yeah.
They'll do it. They will. And I don't think it's because I'm a girl. I think it's just because I'm clear about what it is that I expect.
My last kind of line of questioning is more geared towards like the next steps now.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be careful because it's not as if you're done. Okay, so I want to be respectful, but you did take some time off and then you came back, and then there were some things that were going on. Now you're at this different stage of your life. Have you thought about how much longer you want to do this? Do you want to be an official the whole way through? Do you ever see yourself doing something else in the sport, if not officiating? You know,
it's an everyday thought in my mind. I love the sport so much. I know that the time's going to come where my heart and my head will love this, but my body will tell me it's hard. I'm going to be 70. So this is it's not easy. And I can call a tournament for 10 hours. Now, when I get in my car and I drive 20 minutes home, I can't get out of my car. Yeah. It's that thing. So I know it's coming. I never plan ahead. I can't sit here and tell you right now what next season looks like for me because I'm smart enough to know there's things that could happen physically that change. And as I said 100 times, if I can't be 100% what they need, then I'm not going to be there. I've seen officials stay a little too long at the party, and I don't want to be that person. I have a couple really good friends of mine that I've made promise to say, you're losing it.
Yeah.
You really need to think about it. So I don't think I'm there yet. I mean, I called the state tournament. I enjoy it, but I do. I'm a worker bee. I'm not necessarily the person that pilots a program. I would love to mentor. I would love to do things like that. But I'd rather somebody else set the program and then I will take it. Does that make sense? I'm not good at the bullet points and what needs to be done. Just throw me in the mix and I'll make it happen. It's really interesting.
So to kind of
Not
expand
that
on
didn't
that.
confuse you even more.
No, it's not necessarily confusing. I'm getting the notion of what you're saying, but I'm asking for a little bit more context.
Okay.
So it's clear that you don't necessarily want to ever leave the sport of wrestling, right?
Correct.
You always want to be around this
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
This is my ignorance in terms of like the officiating and like the back of house stuff. So like state, for instance, it's a very well run tournament. But it's like, you know, from the officials to the table people to the people calling the wrestlers in the back.
Correct.
It's like there's a lot
a
of things that go into this
well-oiled
machine.
machine, yes.
Exactly. Are there things that you would want to do or not want to
Yes.
do? Like, would you be a table worker doing the score? Would you be a runner, not necessarily a runner of hitting the officials, the person in the tunnel that says like, all right, 157 on deck. Like, is there anything outside of officiating that you would do or maybe have thought about doing or maybe interests you in doing?
I worked tables at the state tournament for years before I ever did my first state tournament. Wow. In fact, I thought that, and at the time, that was kind of a natural step. You're a certified official, you work that table, you've got the second best seat in the house, and you have the ability to then maybe talk to that official about what you just witnessed, right? And kind of bend an ear just a little bit when they're off the mat. So I've done that, but I did it at a time where it was pencil and paper.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't do the track wrestling thing, and not at all. It makes me nervous. Even though I'm on a computer all day, I couldn't do that. I would love to be an evaluator with Mesha.
Okay. And then
I think I could bring a lot to the table with the last 25 years behind me.
yeah, I was going to ask that and forgive my ignorance, but I don't know what an evaluator is. So what is an evaluator?
Mesha has positions throughout the state. I think there's 4 maybe different areas of the state that are paid minimal, like something ridiculously stupid, small, but to go out and to watch up and comers so that you then evaluate them. There's a
Up
form.
and coming officials.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Up and coming officials.
That we are looking at perhaps for the next level. When are they going to be ready for the state tournament? But it's really just an educational role. So you're going to go, you travel, you go out to this tournament where you have the ability to see 6, 7, 8 officials, and you watch them and evaluate them. The only downside is you don't get to, at that moment, sit down with that official because you're watching everyone, but then you got to go home and type computer this report and get it out to them. But it is, you're looking at everything from their appearance. You know, are they groomed? Are they in the proper uniform?
Professional.
Yes, honestly.
It's sad that even has to be a metric.
but it is, though, honestly, because there are some very strict rules in terms of appearance.
Well, makes sense.
Are they applying the rules? Do they kind of make up their own? And this is where this evaluator that we were talking about earlier may approach a young official and say, this is what I noticed at the 165-pound match, right? We had this thing over in the corner and blah, blah, blah. And I don't see them listening like I wish that they would and taking that to heart. Because everybody at some point thinks they're ready for the state tournament in their second year of officiating. As did I.
Bold.
But I did. I thought literally year 2, I'm like, I could do this.
Yeah.
I was not ready. I called my first state tournament in 2003. I started in 97. My first full year was 98. And I thought I was ready long before then, and I was not.
What was if you don't mind me digging into that, like, why did you think you were ready? And then what was the later determination for the reason why you weren't ready?
Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's not unlike a wrestler. You know, the state tournament, everybody wants to be there, and it's just another tournament. But man, oh man, you stand in that tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a whole other level.
You feel like cattle almost.
Yes. And it smells like cattle most of the time as well. But Yeah. So I just thought, I mean, my feedback had been good, right? I progressed rather quickly. I mean, I was able to do varsity pretty quick. Um, but it's all like right here in my own area. And it wasn't until I was asked to do a tournament in Kansas City, Lee Summit, that after that tournament, I was picked for the state tournament. I'm convinced it's exposure to other coaches who had input, right? That I was only in this little microcosm of area and coaches. But when you see other people and they see what you know and what
you grew your network.
I did, and I wish we did more of that in Missouri. I love to see a greater partnership between Missouri and Kansas City, just because they're the metropolis, and not that discounts Cape Girardeau or
You have two
Springfield
big
or
cities
Columbia.
on the opposite side
Exactly,
of the state.
but I think I would love to see a greater network of KC people coming to St. Louis and vice versa.
I think the only tough part about that is like the logistical like hurdles, right? It's like a 3-hour drive, 3.5-hour drive.
It is, but
the finances associated.
It is, but I mean, you're paid nicely to officiate a tournament,
Okay.
and there isn't an official anywhere in St. Louis that wouldn't house a KC guy if they needed to. I stayed at the coach's house. I stayed at Gary Mabb's house when I went and did the Winnetonka tournament, and the other guy from St. Louis
Free of charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other official that rode with me, he stayed at Winnetonka's, the head coach's house. And it's just what you do. And it really wasn't until the next day, and it was well known that we stayed at their houses. It was not a big deal. And there was a call that didn't go a particular coach's way. And we were at the table discussing it, and he brought up the fact that I
Was staying at that house.
Yes.
It
was pretty crappy. I'm not going to lie. And so
implying bias.
Exactly. And so a couple weeks later, I'm at the Lee Summit tournament, and he's coming across the mat. You know, he's coming towards me, and he shakes my hand, and he goes, "Hi, just wanted to say hello." And I said, "Oh, by the way, I just want you to know I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night." And he chuckled, and he felt bad. He knew that what he said at the table was wrong. Could I have hit him for unsportsmanlike? Maybe, but I didn't. Yeah. So
that actually makes me want to ask a couple of things that I didn't think about earlier. But how often, if you were to do like a pie chart of percentage, you don't change your mind, you do change your mind? Because this is also for me as a coach to kind of like
on
learn.
An individual call.
Yes. So like, let's say you call a takedown, and I'm like, I go to the head desk, I go, "Barb, can I talk to you? Barb, can I talk to you?"
Oh, after a discussion.
Yeah. So like, and then I'm trying to explain, or maybe like, I guess my question is more broad, because sometimes, okay, I'll give you an example. Sometimes the kids get hit with a call that they don't necessarily like, and I think what they want is for me to kind of like,
you should fight for them.
But here's the thing that I'm going to say about this, and maybe I'm wrong. My mentality has always been like, don't put yourself in a position where you need the one call from a referee to make or break a win. If you needed that takedown, and that was the difference between winning and losing, when you are putting your victory or defeat in the hands of another person, do not be upset if they slip it from their fingertips.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong in.
I don't want to rely on her making the perfect call. I want to rely on you being more consistent.
I agree, and that's
Build
that's what a
lead.
coach should say.
Maybe I'm wrong. But I also think that like getting up there and like fighting, I don't know, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's going to result in what you think it's going to result in. Okay. And I would rather be more professional and be looked at as like, that's why I wanted to apologize about me and that one coach, okay? Because I never want the officials to look at me as like some hothead or whatever. I'm very passionate about coaching.
I didn't know till it was over what happened, so. But I get it. I get it.
I'm very passionate about coaching. So like in the heat of the moment, I'm yelling and I'm calling out things, of course. Then if there's like a call, you'll never hear me go like, you fucking suck. You make the right. No, I'll be like, hey, I might talk to you after the fact. Hey, Barb, what was it that you saw that I didn't see? You know what I mean? But I'm not going to fight the call. I just don't think it's going to result in a change. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think you have to ask yourself, how passionate are you about that particular instance? I do think if you can explain yourself, how do I say this? So there are officials that won't change that call
That's the other variable.
until they're taken to the table.
Really?
And maybe that's an opportunity.
Maybe I need to change that about me then, because
And I'm not saying good or bad. I am just saying that if right is right, if that official made a call that they even think is marginal, they may not change it until someone, whether it's their assistant, that brings them aside and said, you just kind of look at them and go, "Want to talk about that?"
So that happened at State with Mercury this year. An official called a takedown on the edge, and I was like, "There's no way that was a takedown. Like that was a bad call."
I had one of his matches this year, but anyway.
You did his last match. He lost because of a caution call, and then he stalled. He lost because of that stalling point. Yeah. And then he's crying off the mats. Forgive me, Mercury. He's crying off the mats. I go, "Hey, you left it in her hands and not in yours. You can't be mad at anybody but yourself.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have stalled."
And you may ask him. I may have said something to him, because he's so much better than that.
Dude, I know.
He's so much better than that.
Now you're speaking to the choir.
No, he has so much ability, both technique and physically, that to kind of lay low at that point you're better than that. And that goes back to let's be creative, right? About what we do.
I know. It's also just, I go back and forth on why I think wrestling is the hardest sport. And sometimes I say because of the physical toll, because it's such a grueling sport. But then, like, once I'm removed from the season, I always look back and I think to myself, no, it is a mental juggernaut.
It's so crazy how, and in one moment it is just like physically, like, I'm done, I am drained. You can watch somebody and know that they've got nothing left in their tank, and then it's so mental, it's so emotional. How many times, and I've seen it as an official, and I'm sure you have as a coach as well, how many times have you seen that kid mentally get broke?
Yeah.
And there is nothing you're going to say to that kid in that moment on that mat that's going to make him do anything. You see his physicalness withdraws, and maybe it's the third takedown, right? That someone it broke them. Didn't break them physically, but emotionally, you see that face, and it's horrible.
Yeah. All
the physical in the world is not going to change when someone has taken you out of your mental game.
I agree 100%, 1,000%.
Yeah, and you can watch it.
It's just.
So, going to the table.
Forgive me.
No, again.
Oh no, but to that point.
Yes.
I didn't have to get up. So the main referee called it a takedown on the outside. I was like, that wasn't a takedown. And I was kind of looking at him. The assistant ref went to him. I don't know what he said to him, but it was like short conversation, like,
didn't have it. Yeah.
Ref goes back to the table and waves it off. And I was like, thank God. I didn't even have to make a scene or like say something.
I love that. I love it because we work really hard at the role of the assistant. Because at the state tournament, the assistant didn't come in for years until the semis. But I still think that first match at the state tournament is just as important as that semifinal round. So for several years now, they've had assistants first match all the way through the finals. So I love to hear that, and it's just something very simple between two officials. I might make that call and I look up and he goes, "Want to talk about that?" And we walk over and he goes, "I don't have it." I go, "You sure?" "Yep." "Okay, done." Period. It's easily rectified. And it's just knowing that you have to be able to say, pretty positive. It was there. Foot was out, came back in, not there.
How do I ask this question? Has there ever been a moment where you felt the officials were not holding each other accountable for any bias or anything like that amongst one another's? So I know that you don't necessarily have a bias, and that's what you've kind of explained here today. But has there ever been an instance where you've seen a ref, and it doesn't have to be in the state of Missouri, what have you, like as broad as that question can be, Has there ever been a moment where you've felt like you needed to say something, or someone else said something? Because I will say this, I have an immense amount of respect and admiration for a lot of the Misha officials.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that I do not. And
Of
it is
course.
and it is for the perception
Yes.
of bias. I cannot
Yes.
say if there is, and I would not make that statement.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the perceived bias. And then you start learning where they went to high school, and you start learning what kind of connections they have. Now, just because they're friends, and just because, like, you could stay at someone's house and still be impartial.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I always say perceived.
Yeah.
But I would like to know if conversations are ever had amongst your peers and yourself.
I'd be lying if I said that there wasn't. I think in the very beginning, one of the things that drove me to want to do this and do it well was just being a mom in the stands and saw things that I knew weren't right, that I just knew weren't right.
Bad calls.
And it wasn't necessarily involving my kid. It's just I knew enough to know that's not right. And we talk amongst ourselves in our association about conflict of interest. Don't put yourself. You have to be able to assess yourself, and don't put yourself in a position where there's a conflict of interest, whether it's where you went to high school. Now, of course, that was 50 years ago for me, so I can certainly call a Hazelwood Central match and not have a problem. But there was a time for probably 10 years after my son went to school there that I didn't want to be on a mat with a Hazelwood Central kid. And there will always be people, and it's not because they're male, it just happened to be male. I was the only girl that they can't police themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's human nature, and they think they can do it right. Even if you make every call right, you're going to be perceived by the other side that it's wrong because of your connection. Even though you made the right call, why would you put yourself or your wrestlers in a position to question what you just did?
Correct. It's the
You have to-
perception of bias.
Yes.
I could be wrong. I could be dead-faced wrong, but I wouldn't want to put myself in any position where there could even be a conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And it's herein lies the struggle that I have when I walk in a gym to get ready to do a duel or a tournament. And, there's boys and girls and how differently they kind of react to me. These girls, I love them like they're my own children. And we have a connection just because we're all girls. But they'll come up and hug, and they're doing the heart thing, and I adore it more than I'll ever tell you. But I know that somewhere in those bleachers, somebody's watching that hug. Could be her opponent in 3 more rounds. Who knows? And so it doesn't change how I act, but I many times will say, hey, you're not going to get an extra takedown for that, because I want it known.
Meaning hugging and doing the hearts to you.
Yes.
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 Showing an affection for you.
Yes.
And you're like, hey,
And
I'm an official
but I make
first.
it verbal because I don't want anyone that may be a bystander to misinterpret what's going on. And it's so interesting that they're what they say back to me is always, oh, no, Barb, you make us work harder than anybody. And they know that. Several years ago, there's a local team that I saw many times through the season, girls, and their coach at the end of the season took a picture and sent me the whiteboard that was in their workout room. And the whiteboard said, "Would Barb be pleased with your effort today?" It's unbelievable, the effect that you can have, that it's not a matter of, oh, we love you and, oh, we want to hug you because we want to get an extra 3 points. It's because we want to work really hard for you. And I love it so much.
God bless.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, here's what I'm going to say as someone who wrestled and benefited from officials, and now I'm a coach who still benefits from all the work that you guys do.
What a family, right?
Right? Isn't it weird?
Yeah.
Sometimes at odds, but we're all on the same team.
Yes.
Even if we don't necessarily all view it that way, we are all on the same. Without you, we can't do it. Without us, it can't be done.
Yeah.
It takes without the kids, it can't be done.
Oh, it takes a village,
It's
man.
everybody.
Yeah.
It's everybody. So from one person to another, thank you for putting in all the years that you've done and taking in all the inspirations that you have and giving it the weight that it deserves. Because in a lot of ways, you've said a lot of things about how you handle officiating, and they're the exact same thoughts that I have now as a coach. And I think that your passion is not the right way to do it. It's the only way to properly do it.
It brings to mind my first state tournament, 2003. The director of Mesha at that time, his name was Dale Plyman, and he talked to me at our meeting on Wednesday night before the tournament started, and he says, everybody wants to talk to you right now, right? You're the first female. And you don't have to do any of it. If you choose, it would be nice to do the local Columbia paper, news channel, whatever it was at the time. And I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So I'm in the tunnel at the Hearns, and this reporter comes out. I'm getting ready to take the mat for the very first time at the state tournament. He's got a microphone, and he says, so, how much crap have you taken? That's his first question to a referee that's getting ready to call their first state tournament ever.
Tone deaf, man.
And
Tone deaf.
It's a whole new meaning to read the room.
Yeah.
So normally, I'm usually pretty sarcastic. I would usually come back, but I was like, well, to be honest with you, and this is the truth, I will say this today. I walked into a male-dominated area, and I knew that. It was for no reason other than the love of the sport, so that was okay. But I had to understand that I'm walking onto a mat with the potential coach in the corner that's been there for 40 years. I'm invading his territory. So you have to understand, first of all, that there's a little something there that I may encounter because he doesn't want me there or doesn't think I deserve to be there. But all I ever asked was 6 minutes, and back then 28 feet, which is what the mat was then, and then tell me what you think.
Yeah.
Because the vast majority of people in this sport wants someone who is fair, who's consistent, who loves the sport, and wants to promote it. I don't think anybody in the sport, I've never, other than that guy, I have never found anyone that treated me what I think is unfairly because I was a girl. I think they didn't like me in the beginning because I wasn't good. I don't think it's because I was a girl. And if you're tough enough to stick around, and I think that would be for a male or a female, don't let that bother you. If you're doing this for the right reason, which is the love of the sport, you'll figure it out. And they'll figure it out, and you'll get better, and the relationship will get better. But it wasn't because I was a girl. I think those first couple of years was rough because I just wasn't good yet. And it's the biggest thing that I'm in a network of women's officials on a group, me or a WhatsApp, whatever, one of those. And there's like 30 some odd women around the country that are on this group chat. And we talk about rules, we talk about situations, they'll post something off of Flow and we'll discuss it. And it's a very useful resource for someone just coming in to the ranks as a young woman in the sport, in the sport of officiating anyway. And the only negative, and it's not negative, but the only thing that I think I bring to the table, and I call them on it, is somebody will say, well, I didn't get a locker room, I pound the fist. I didn't get a final, it's because I'm a girl. No, maybe you're not good enough yet. Don't use that. Seriously, when you become a liability, no one's going to want you back, right? You have to call a good match. You have to blend in with the group. You have to understand your role as a junior official and soak in all the knowledge you can. You didn't get a final because maybe you weren't a girl. Maybe you got it because you weren't real good yet.
Yeah.
So that's my take.
My only caveat to that is I think our society has never been more meritocracy while also simultaneously never being more victimized.
True.
Like we all
No.
think that it's this, that, or the other. While we all, whenever we win, I did it. I was the
Yeah.
one who was good enough. I was this, that, or the other. Whenever we don't, it's because of this, that, or the other reason. It's like the same mentality that got you to dance is the same mentality you have to take
I
home.
knew I had to pay my dues. I knew I needed to learn. I had to take my time. I'll bet you I probably did 9, 10 state tournaments before I ever got a locker room. But if you think about it, you're the only girl in a gym with 850 wrestlers, probably 845 of them are guys at that time. I can't expect.
To be accommodated.
I can't. I think that's wrong. Now, have they made great strides? I am still the only female there, but Greg Stahl made sure I had a locker room. Daryl Bradley, who's the new head of Misha, not only made sure I had a locker room, but put a Mesha officials only sign on it, and said, clearly, is this okay with you? And it was life-changing, life-changing. And I thought it was just wonderful that I had a room. The fact that you put a sticker on it was just icing on the cake. And it took me 23 years to get that. But I didn't fault anyone for it. The logistics were what they were. I was the only girl. So you have to be smart. Again, I just didn't want to be a liability. I just want to go and referee a match. And if I had to change in a restroom or if I had to come dressed out, okay, not a big deal. Now, as we gain in numbers, do I want that to change? Absolutely, I do. I'm the head official at Wonder Woman tournament, and that's been, I don't know, 6 years or so.
Can you explain Wonder Woman to people that might not know?
Oh
Forgive
my
me.
gosh, it's the most glorious thing on the planet. So it is. It's the dream in women's wrestling. So Mike Wakeham, who wrestled at McClure North back in the day, then he went on to Missouri Baptist and wrestled there. He's an educator, he's a teacher, and he's been at a handful of high schools. And he kind of is the brainchild. And he put together this all women's wrestling tournament held in Columbia, Missouri. 673 girls this past wrestling season from 8 states, national after nationally ranked girls. But it's all girls. And it's phenomenal. And it's like, I mean, when you see these girls in their element and knowing that everybody in that gym is like them, it's a pivotal moment. It's really very cool. His purpose is to have, eventually, we'd like all female officials. We're not at that level yet. I have 12, a couple years ago, I had 12 Missouri state officials on our crew.
That were female.
No.
Oh.
All males and me. So there were all 12 of us were state officials, but 11 of them were the guys and me. And then about 3 years ago, I began to filter in. Somebody came to me and said, hey, there's this girl out of Texas that we just worked with that's phenomenal. And so I watched some of her stuff and brought her in. Last year we had 5 women from 5 different states that all call their own state tournament. So if I'm going to get rid of a state quality male official and bring in a girl,
I already know where you're going with
you
this.
better be damn good.
God bless.
It is. It's
God
not
bless.
about being a girl.
It's not about checking a box, too.
No, the goal, the end goal, is to have an all-female crew.
At the same level
100%. That's why we've only...
Or better.
That's why we've only got 5 right now, because it's just, we're not there yet. Women, once they're done at the high school level, many will go on to college. Many more wrestle in college than guys will wrestle in college, because there's more opportunity for them right now. But we're only going to get them as bona fide officials by attrition. They're gonna do what women do. They're gonna go to college. They're gonna coach. They're gonna do all those things, as I would have done. If I were a college wrestler, I'd want to coach somewhere.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. And so there are going to be those people, though, that maybe they're not in education. Maybe they don't want to coach a team, but they want to be in the sport. We're going to get those people on the back end. So I think we're a ways away from having an all-female crew. Particularly, I'd love to see them all be Missouri, but we've not been great in Missouri about bringing along female officials just yet.
But I also
It's getting
think,
better.
But I also think it's only 2025. It came in 2018, and then 2 of those years were also COVID years. So like I also kind of give that some caveat. So you're talking about roughly 7 years ago,
Yes.
women's wrestling became a thing. In a lot of ways, to go piggyback earlier in the conversation where we were talking about like the societal changes that it'll
Baby
make,
steps.
it'll be the same thing with this.
It's infancy.
How much?
Exactly.
How many more girls are now inundated with the sport of wrestling than previously were? And then what will that lead to later on? Yes, the coaching. You're going to have female-only coaches, but it's also going to do for officiating as well. The numbers will just go up.
The particular woman that I brought in from Texas, her name's Kim Hernandez. She's amazing. But she wrestled in Texas. Texas was one of the first 3 states in the country to sanction women's wrestling. And I mean, 20 years ago. So they have a long history of women wrestling, and their officials network is huge. I mean, huge. They do all female tournaments down there, and their whole crew are women, and they're bona fide, solid officials. We're not there yet, only because we are 15 years behind them in that process. So we'll get them eventually, and yeah, there'll be a space for them. But this particular tournament I just take very personally that he allows me to hire the officials for this, and again, I want the best of the best. And it's nice because I've had a couple of the guys that are 10, 15-year state officials have said to me, look, I will gladly back down if there's a woman that you think that you want to bring in, because I want that goal to be met as well, and I want all these officials to be women. So these guys they understand the value, they know how important it is, and they're willing to back away if there's someone that I think is ready to come in.
God bless.
Oh, it's so fun. Gosh, I love it so much.
Barb.
Sorry.
No.
Yes.
No, I love the passion. It goes back to the thing I was thanking you for. It was just like, it takes a village. You're absolutely correct. Everyone from the table workers to the officials to the coaches to the kids.
It's a really big part of who my son is today, wrestling and coaches and people in his life. And, drug my daughter around to all the wrestling tournaments. So she has that background of being in a gym and knowing what it's like to watch her brother compete and watch everybody around her be, in the sport.
Engrossed in that world, yeah.
Yeah. And she's very active in high school kids' lives right now. But that wrestling thing for him is a really big part of who he is as a human, the kind of husband that he is, the kind of father that he is, the kind of brother that he is. It's wrestling. It is wrestling.
For better and worse.
Yeah. I mean, and he'd be the first to tell you that it is his faith and his belief in Jesus Christ, and it is. But long before that came the sport, and it is just ingrained in who he is. And he was watching the Big Ten's semifinals last night at home in bed, and I'm at home in bed, and we're texting each other, boy, did you see that match? And it was great. It's good stuff.
Barb, we're like way over 2 hours.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. No,
Serious?
listen, this was an immense joy for me. This was exactly the conversation I wanted to have. I wanted to thank you for just taking the time out of your day. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Could have been anywhere else. You decided to be sitting in here with me, so I do appreciate that, the time.
You're welcome.
And I hope one of the things I wanted to do with this podcast was just talk to people that I could see were like passionate in something. Sometimes that something is it's closer to home. Sometimes it doesn't. But I'll say this, I am blessed because I get to see the same fervor, the same passion that I had for the things that I did in my life.
In someone else.
Dude, it's the exact same thing.
It is.
It's the joy. It's
and I cannot understand what it would have been like as an athlete, right, to come through that.
Yeah, you could have. You
Well,
see it every day.
But I do see it, and I witnessed some amazing things. But it is, yeah, I see coaches that live and breathe their athletes. And it's one of the things that I tell young officials, you have to be a little thick-skinned. You have to understand that coach in the corner spends 3 hours a day, 5 months out of the year with that kid in a room. Yeah. And if he gets a little silly, or if he gets a little overzealous, he can't make it personal. He or she cannot make it personal. And there's a line that you can't cross. But understand their investment in that wrestler. And they're going to fight for their kid. And there's a portion of that you have to be able to digest and not take personally. They can't call me by my name. They can't, say a bad word. They can't do those things. But they're going to fight for. Why would you not want them to fight for their athlete? Yeah. And you have to understand that. So that's the mutual understanding that we have.
Here's one last rub I wanted to give to you, because multiple times you've brought up in this conversation that, like, I never did it, so, like, I don't know. Here's what I'm going to say. That's, like, something that you're saying, being humble, and I'm going to throw another caveat to you. You may have not competed in wrestling, like, in your high school days, but you've also spent more years in this sport than I have being alive.
True.
And there is something to that. And I don't subscribe. It's the same thing I say about fighting, too, because this comes up not just in wrestling, but other things as well. I think proximity to power can give you the disillusion of being powerful yourself. Simultaneously, I think there's nothing more powerful than dedicating time. I would take the person that's been in the sport for 30 years and never competed once over the kid that's done it for 1 year or 5 years and maybe has competed. You are more, I want to be careful how I say this, because I don't want to sound like I'm being rude to anybody. I want to make this like a good thing. You have spent a good portion of your time on this planet engrossed in this world. How could you not be at least adept into it? I just hope that you understand that. Like, don't fucking give that bullshit. Like, I never, fuck that. Fuck that. You've been in the sport for longer than I've been alive, and you've been officiating for a good amount of time.
What year were you born?
92.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was 92 through 96 were the 5 seasons that I coached a youth club.
Yeah.
So,
okay, longer than I've been alive.
Yes, true.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is I get where that's coming from, and I love it. I'm not trying to change that. However, I think you've earned the stripes. I think you've earned the stripes. So.
It's other than being a mom, it is the coolest joy and the coolest thing I've ever done. It's brought me more joy than I could ever have imagined. Right behind being a mom.
God bless, Barb.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, are you kidding me? Thank you.
How fun.